An establishing shot reveals a beautiful artificial island estate situated near the empire's capital. High society nobles mingle at an exclusive gathering attended by the empire's most elite figures. At the banquet, the red-eyed woman in a crimson dress looks deeply tense and furious. The distressed, dark-haired woman inwardly screams in confusion, lamenting that she got possessed despite just fully paying off her car. She fondly remembers her glamorous modern life standing proudly beside her brand-new red car. A dramatic transition title page shows the dark-haired villainess lying among scattered red roses. She panics over her unpaid modern credit card bills, wishing she had stayed asleep in her company's nap room. An abstract transition slide prepares to explain the events that led to her sudden transportation. Overworked employee Sarah Yanai snuck into an empty movie theater for a quick afternoon nap. Sudden emergency notification flashes on her phone, warning citizens of a nearby zombie gate. She grumbles in frustration at her phone screen right before she is suddenly transported. She suddenly opens her eyes, revealing a pair of glowing, vibrant red eyes. She finds herself standing inside a magnificent, sparkling fantasy castle with golden columns. Text message from her friend recommended a novel featuring a villainess named Sarah. She realizes she possessed the villainess of a dark romance novel featuring zombies. Overwhelmed by the shocking truth, the red-eyed woman slams her hands down and demands answers. A flashback shows the original villainess crying and throwing a fit in a pink dress. The original villainess was infamous for her haughty, childish, and constantly petulant behavior. Back in reality, the two noblewomen continue gossiping while the red-eyed woman watches them. The noblewomen whisper maliciously, wondering if the notorious villainess will cause another embarrassing scene. One noblewoman comments on how unusually quiet the villainess has been during today's gathering. In chibi form, she panics internally over being judged despite having just arrived. She desperately tries to convince herself this is a dream, counting on her theater alarm. Using her skills as a working adult, she calms down to assess the situation. Staring at her plate, she begrudgingly accepts that she is still stuck there. She covers her face in deep distress, realizing she only barely skimmed the original novel. She remembers only reading up to the villainess's gruesome death on a subway ride. Looking around her current surroundings, she finally connects the dots to the novel's characters. A glittering illustration reveals the three beautiful main protagonists of the romance fantasy novel. A text card introduces the first male lead, the cold and handsome Crown Prince Plaha. Visuals introduce the brooding black-haired Crown Prince Plaha alongside the charming blonde-haired Grand Duke. The sparkling and innocent pink-haired heroine, Rina, is introduced as the center of attention. The red-eyed woman marvels at Rina's naturally pink hair, amused by the fantasy setting. The sweetly smiling Grand Duke of the South stands nearby, radiating charm and worth. A childhood flashback shows that the Grand Duke was the only one kind to young Sarah. Mistaking his simple kindness for romantic love, the young villainess had passionately confessed her feelings. The Grand Duke coldly rejected her confession, warning her not to mistake manners for love. Sarah was left shattered after being brutally and heartlessly rejected by her only childhood friend. Following that devastating rejection, the story predictably took a turn for the worse. Sarah grew to deeply hate the Grand Duke, while he became completely indifferent to her. The pink-haired heroine, Rina, looks up with a look of soft, innocent surprise. Driven by bitter jealousy, the original Sarah relentlessly bullied the terrified pink-haired heroine. Crown Prince Blaha held a social gathering solely to create an opportunity to see Rina. Because of Plaha's direct influence, Rina was invited despite not being a noble. Sarah reflects on her inevitable role as the villainous bully destined to make Rina's life miserable. Naturally, Crown Prince Plaha holds a deep disdain for Sarah because of her cruel actions. Plaha glares with cold yellow eyes, silently warning her to stay away from Rina. Although Plaha hides his hatred behind a quiet facade, his animosity remains highly palpable. In a flashback, Sarah tried to talk to Plaha, but he dismissed her coldly. She recalls screaming in absolute frustration at Plaha's immediate rude rejection of her. Sarah maintains her composure, relying on her skills as a capable corporate working adult to stay calm. She decides not to interfere, mentally noting that the novel's main events are about to begin. A resonant chime echoes throughout the estate, marking the arrival of 7 o'clock in the evening. The guests whisper to each other, noting the unusual and unsettling silence hanging over the island estate. Realizing the servants are missing, one of the concerned guests decides to go investigate. An ominous, blood-red silhouette of a monstrous zombie growls menacingly from the shadows. The guest freezes in absolute terror as a gruesome, glowing-eyed zombie looms directly over him. A sudden deadly strike covers a gleaming steel sword in fresh, splattering blood. A stone-faced knight holds his bloodied sword upright, having just dispatched the threat. The blonde-haired man shields the pink-haired woman, while the panicked guests demand to know what is happening. A terrified brown-suited noble clutches the knight's shoulder, trembling and questioning the sudden chaos. Sarah watches silently, recognizing that the novel's dark survival horror plot has officially begun. The decapitated head of the infected servant lies in a pool of dark blood on the floor. A detailed survivor roster displays the names and faces of those trapped inside the Imperial Villa. The severed head sits frozen in a grotesque state bathed in an eerie light. A high-pitched scream echoes loudly through the corridor as a door is hurriedly pushed open. The three main protagonists stare in shock, their faces pale as the grim reality sets in. The arrogant noble looks down at the remains, dismissively commenting on how disgusting and unsettling it is. The noble cautiously inspects the face, wondering if the corpse is just a convincing fake. Sarah remains unbothered, internally identifying the reckless noble as the crown prince's foolish cousin. The noble repulsively demands a quick cleanup, prompting Sarah to mentally label him a complete sleazebag. The noblewoman suspects an assassin, while the blonde-haired Grand Duke wonders why the estate's exterior is completely empty. Sarah realizes the guests' confusion is normal since they have no idea they are dealing with zombies. She notes that none of them comprehend the danger of infection from this reanimated corpse. Sarah wonders how an outsider could have bypassed the island's strict security to infiltrate the estate. The noblewomen discuss the tight security of the island, questioning if a security breach occurred at the palace. A horrific red sky reveals that the monsters did not use portals but rained down from above. A noblewoman panics over the missing knights, while a chibi Sarah mentally confirms they have all been infected. Sarah laments that she cannot warn them about the infection right before her name is suddenly called. Crown Prince Plaho approaches Sarah, looming over her with an intense, unreadable expression. Sarah looks at the handsome prince, starkly remembering him as the one destined to end her life. Intimidated by his perfect yet cold features, Sarah quickly assures the crown prince that she is fine. Plaha points out her pale complexion and she dismisses his concern by claiming she is merely tired. The crown prince advises her that it is dangerous to remain isolated during such a crisis. Realizing he is telling her to join the group for safety, she reluctantly complies with his silent command. Turning away, Crown Prince Plaha demands a status report on the estate's perimeter from his knights. Knights bow deeply, reporting that the nearby rooms are empty of all servants and guards. The knight reveals they found an unconscious servant, signaling to Sarah that a deadly sequence has been triggered. Sarah recalls the novel's events, where the unconscious servant is brought into the room under the prince's orders. She remembers that the deceased servant had a fatal chest wound and was missing an entire arm. The narrative recalls how the survivors desperately tried to identify the weapon that killed the servant. During their frantic investigation, the hand of the supposedly dead servant suddenly twitched in the blood. Believing there is still hope, a knight quickly checks the body and shouts that he is alive. The moment the unrelenting knight leans down to listen for a heartbeat, disaster immediately strikes. A horrific screech pierces the air as the reanimated servant savagely lunges forward with glowing eyes. Sarah realizes that warning them is useless, yet staying silent will result in a knight's brutal death. Crown Prince Plaha commands the knights to retrieve the body carefully, promising to protect everyone inside. The blonde duke questions the odd order, but the prince firmly insists on securing the body first. Sarah frets silently, knowing the flimsy ropes will do absolutely nothing to contain a frenzied zombie. She battles her internal panic, desperately trying to stop herself from speaking up and causing a scene. The nervous, brown-haired knight receives instructions from the cold and silent Crown Prince Plaha. She panics internally, deeply regretting that her professional adult skills failed to prevent this dangerous situation. The knights begrudgingly examine the corpse, complaining about Sarah giving them orders, though they decide to remain cautious. She orders them to stuff her handkerchief into the corpse's mouth once they confirm his death. Sarah warns them to avoid getting bitten, but the ponytail knight dismisses her warning as utter nonsense. The blue-haired knight quietly realizes that her warning was genuinely meant for their own safety. The blue-haired knight decides to cautiously play along and pretend to follow her advice. She feels absolute dread watching them transport a body that is actively transforming into a monster. She completely gives up on the absurd situation as the dark corpse looms in the background. Desperately wishing to go home, Sarah is shielded by the golden-haired Grand Duke who urges her to step back. Sarah worries she is being viewed with suspicion again, but quickly forces herself to focus on the immediate danger. Looking at the ominous corpse, Sarah regrets not telling the knights to break the creature's jaw instead. Crown Prince Plaha asks the kneeling knight Kimon about the missing handkerchief, who insists the servant is truly dead. Kimon admits he didn't want to waste her handkerchief, prompting a panicked Sarah to scream at him to run. Kimon reassures her with a gentle smile, completely unaware that a bloody zombie hand has just seized his wrist. Kimon gasps in shock as the golden-haired Grand Duke desperately warns them of the imminent threat. A sudden gruesome bite tears into flesh with blood splattering in the dark hallway. The golden-haired Grand Duke firmly restrains Sarah as she gasps in absolute horror at the sudden violence. Crown Prince Plaha asks the wounded Kimon if he is all right, holding the severed head of the defeated zombie. Plaha thanks Sarah for saving Kimon's life, but she internally despairs knowing Kimon was bitten near his brain. Dark red veins spread across Kimon's face as the terrifying transformation takes hold. The freshly turned zombie snarls with hollow eyes, completely consumed by the monstrous infection. As the system warns of the sudden infection, Crown Prince Plaha swiftly draws his sword to strike. With a decisive and brutal swing, Crown Prince Plaha decapitates the newly transformed knight. Crown Prince Plaha crouches in silence beside the bleeding, headless corpse on the floor. The arrogant cousin is driven to violent sickness, vomiting in disgust at the horrifying scene before him. The blonde noblewoman panics in sheer terror, realizing that any bite leads to a monstrous zombie infection. Plaha and the Duke realize rescue is impossible, agreeing they must escape the villa before they are overrun. Crown Prince Plaha holds the trembling, pink-haired heroine close to his side for safety. The innocent Rina pleads to rescue survivors, while Sarah curiously wonders how the male leads will respond. A close look at Sarah's striking red eyes reveals her calculating thoughts amidst the chaos. The two male leads freeze in surprise, debating whether to follow the naive heroine's dangerous request. High tension builds as the narrative questions their choices in this incredibly dangerous situation. The fate of the survivors rests on whether the powerful male leads will follow the heroine's words. Sarah assumes they will naturally agree to the heroine's plea, since this is a typical romance novel. The golden-haired Duke objects, pointing out the danger of fighting with 5 defenseless people in their group. Sarah is left completely dumbfounded in her chibi form as her prediction falls flat. A dramatic illustration of the two powerful male leads highlights their crucial roles in this dark survival story. Plaha firmly tells Rina that they must realistically assume the other guests were already dead. An aerial view of the isolated island villa reveals the rapid spread of the highly contagious disease. The blonde noblewoman agrees with Plaha, acknowledging the harsh truth despite understanding Rina's concern. The analytical Duke coughs politely and suggests they clearly define the rules of the ongoing crisis. He details the rules of infection, emphasizing that the moving dead can only be stopped by decapitation. The golden-haired Duke gestures with 3 fingers as he continues outlining their tactical survival plan. Crown Prince Plaha points out that they are currently cornered in the innermost room of the second floor. A detailed floor plan reveals a sub-portal in the kitchen that could serve as their escape route. Crouched on the floor, Sarah resolves to gather her gear and survive to enjoy her hard-earned incentives. She successfully finds a simple paper knife to use as a makeshift weapon for defense. The blue-haired knight suddenly kneels before Sarah, holding her hand with an apologetic expression. The concerned blue-haired knight asks if she is all right, leaving her utterly confused by his sudden kindness. Politeness shines through as Darjeeling warmly thanks Sarah for her life-saving advice from earlier. Relieved that he survived, Sarah asks the dark-haired knight for his name, which is Darjeeling. Sarah enthusiastically clasps Darjeeling's hands, completely catching the polite knight off guard with her warmth. The main trio looks on in silent, completely dumbfounded disbelief at Sarah's sudden friendly interaction. Noticing the heavy silence, Sarah nervously wonders if she has said something incredibly strange. A smug, mocking smile breaks across the face of the higher-ranking blonde noblewoman. Mascarpone condescendingly remarks that Sarah should focus on her own survival instead of worrying about others. Sarah recalls that Mascarpone's family deals in magical supplies, like the Crown Prince's binding wires. Mascarpone mockingly warns Sarah not to wave her useless weapon around and cause more trouble. Brown-haired noblewoman nervously tries to pull Mascarpone back, urging her to stop provoking conflicts. Unbothered by the insults, Sarah calmly turns her attention to the nervous brown-haired noblewoman. Sarah playfully guesses if the brown-haired woman's name is Tiramisu, prompting a panicked, emphatic denial. Dismissing the banter, Sarah ties her dark hair back, advising the others to prepare themselves. Mascarpone watches in utter bewilderment, completely unable to comprehend Sarah's sudden shift in attitude. Sarah boldly crouches down to inspect the dead zombie, sending the squeamish noblewomen into panicky screams. Eyeing the slippers nearby, Sarah decides the dead zombie's sturdy combat boots are far more practical. With a swift kick, Sarah discards her impractical high heels to prepare for real combat. Fully equipped with the boots and her paper knife, Sarah proudly declares herself ready for survival. Turning back, Sarah wonders about the mysterious glowing object she spotted earlier on the zombie. A mysterious red gemstone glows with an intense magical light on the dead zombie's chest. A strange pulsing energy radiates directly from the chest area of the fallen creature. A bright holy light suddenly bursts from Rina's hands as she activates her healing magic. The Grand Duke warmly thanks Rina for her magic, highlighting her background as a temple priestess. The narrative highlights Rina's rise from a humble temple orphan to a beloved imperial priestess. Sarah inwardly reveals that Rina's famous healing magic is actually only capable of curing minor cuts. Pubri furiously yells at Rina, blaming her weak magic for the loss of his shield knight. Pubri continues his cruel insults while a tearful chibi Rina quietly offers a meek apology. Sarah is deeply repulsed by Pubri's scummy behavior, wishing she could insult him directly. Mascarpone fiercely snaps at Pubri, defending Rina and pointing out the knight's unavoidable death. Sarah feels a wave of relief, realizing Mascarpone's aggressive attitude spares absolutely no one. When Pubri hurls a crude insult, Sarah grabs him and firmly commands everyone to keep moving. The golden-haired Grand Duke glances back, his sharp green eyes narrowing in quiet intrigue. Walking down the second-floor hallway, the Grand Duke notes that Sarah seems entirely different today. Crown Prince Plaha leads the group in tense silence, casting a cold gaze forward. Staring ahead, Crown Prince Plaha silently agrees that Sarah's behavior has completely changed. Chibi Sarah tries to dismiss his comment as fatigue, but the Chibi Grand Duke disagrees. The Grand Duke softly points out her changed aura and her surprising willingness to help Rina. Sarah bluntly deflects the praise to Mascarpone, asking the Grand Duke to stop talking to her. Crown Prince Plaha suddenly halts, raising a finger to his lips to demand absolute silence. Sarah stops in her tracks, her expression turning serious as a sudden tension fills the air. Peering through the shadows, Sarah's eyes widen in horror at a massive pile of monsters below. The group stands frozen in absolute dread before a massive horde of red-eyed zombies ahead. Panicking at the sight, Rina trips and accidentally steps heavily onto Sarah's new combat boot. With a sudden yelp, Sarah loses her balance and falls backward onto the hallway carpet. Instantly, both Plaha and the Grand Duke desperately reach out their hands to catch her. Sarah raises her hand, preparing to thank whichever handsome male lead has come to her rescue. Sarah freezes in awkward silence as she realizes the true nature of the situation. A sudden wave of disappointment washes over her as she realizes the rescue wasn't for her. Sarah sighs in silent self-deprecation, confirming that the male leads were actually reaching for Rina. The system mockingly delivers a popularity poll result, leaving a popcorn-eating Sarah completely spaceless. Feeling utterly forgotten after receiving 0 votes in the popularity poll, the dark-haired Sarah is left with no choice but to stand up completely on her own. The black-haired crown prince calls out to her in concern, but the dark-haired Sarah dismisses it, insisting she is perfectly fine despite being ignored. The dark-haired woman looks down at her palm, noting that she accidentally injured her hand during the scuffle. Looking at her only defense, the dark-haired woman laments that even her simple paper knife is completely broken. The blonde noblewoman condescendingly remarks that the self-inflicted injury is simply the natural consequence of recklessly carrying a knife around. The golden-haired Grand Duke offers an apology to the dark-haired woman, while the black-haired Crown Prince struggles to explain his actions. The dark-haired woman insists she does not mind, secretly comforting herself with thoughts of her real-world friends to ease her feelings of isolation. Overcome with intense guilt, the pink-haired heroine kneels on the floor, weeping and blaming herself for the entire situation. The pink-haired heroine tearfully begs the dark-haired woman to get treated, but Sarah firmly demands that she stop and reiterates that she is fine. A close look at the pink-haired heroine reveals her eyes pooling with tears as she softly whispers the noblewoman's name. Looking at her with steady crimson eyes, the dark-haired woman calmly tells her what she should do if she is truly remorseful. Pointing out the obvious sprain on her ankle, the dark-haired woman tells the pink-haired heroine to use her healing energy on her own foot instead. Brushing off the tension, the dark-haired woman in the red dress commands the group to continue moving forward. The group's escape is immediately halted as they discover the main central staircase is completely blocked by a massive, horrific pile of zombie corpses. After finishing off the last zombie, the golden-haired Grand Duke deduces that the fallen creature was actually holding back a larger horde from reaching them. Deciding that staying out in the open hallway is far too risky, the group agrees to take shelter and rest inside a nearby room. Exhausted from the relentless danger, the remaining survivors sit down on the carpet of the spacious room to recover. Sweating and visibly shaken, the blonde noblewoman sighs in exhaustion, praying that they will not encounter any more of the terrifying undead. Analyzing their grim circumstances, the golden-haired Grand Duke grimly points out that more infected are undoubtedly lurking throughout the rest of the villa. The blonde noblewoman raises a crucial question, wondering how a servant managed to bypass the staircase guards and reach the inner hallway unnoticed. Holding his chin in deep contemplation, the black-haired crown prince suggests the servant likely navigated through the hidden servants' passage. The hidden wall passages allow the estate staff to move quickly and discreetly, explaining how the infected servant traveled undetected. Staring down thoughtfully, the dark-haired woman begins to realize the tactical potential of using the secret servants' passage for their own escape. A detailed map layout highlights the dangerous central staircase, the distant alternative staircase, and the hidden servants' passage located nearby. The analytical dark-haired woman proposes using the hidden servants' passage as a shortcut to bypass the blocked main staircase and escape. The black-haired prince quickly raises a dark concern, pointing out that the infected creatures are highly likely to be trapped inside that narrow passage. Realizing she overlooked the danger inside the narrow walls, the dark-haired woman concedes that the distant left staircase is their only safe alternative. The black-haired prince notes the formidable distance to the left staircase, but the dark-haired woman points out they have no other options. Looking weary, the blonde noblewoman asks for a realistic estimate of the distance they will need to cover to escape. Standing by the wall, the male leads explain that they must traverse a long distance to descend and then double back once downstairs. Hearing the daunting distance of their escape route, the pink-haired heroine looks downward in silent, mounting despair. The arrogant noble angrily yells at the pink-haired heroine, criticizing her for wasting her magical blessings instead of treating her own injuries first. Annoyed by the relentless complaining, the dark-haired woman glares over as the arrogant noble begins to pitch a selfish new idea. With a cold and utterly self-serving expression, the arrogant noble suggests that they should prioritize their own survival and escape ahead of the rest. The shocking, cold-hearted proposal leaves the black-haired prince and the golden-haired Grand Duke staring back in stunned, speechless disbelief. The arrogant noble defends his cowardly plan, arguing that getting dragged down by deadweight and failing to escape would be an unbearable outcome. Her blood boiling at the cruel comment, the dark-haired woman fiercely warns the arrogant noble to watch his tongue before things escalate. Stepping forward to intervene, the black-haired crown prince firmly silences the noble, completely rejecting his heartless definition of a rational decision. Shaking his finger dismissively, the cowardly noble backtracks to clarify that he specifically wants the knight to stay behind and cover their escape. The dark-haired knight stands in silent shock as the noble heartlessly declares that his survival is of absolutely no concern to them. Filled with utter disgust at the noble's vile words, the dark-haired woman abruptly stands up in her sturdy black combat boots. Crossing her arms in front of a radiant floral backdrop, the dark-haired woman fiercely declares that she cannot let his cowardice slide. Caught completely off guard by her sudden outburst, the cowardly noble stammers in surprise, attempting to weakly justify his terrible attitude. The dark-haired woman mocks him, pointing out that she refuses to be called deadweight by someone who is equally useless to the group. The two powerful male leads are shown in their adorable chibi forms, looking mildly flattered by her description of them as sturdy men. The cowardly noble continues to argue, pointing out that the pink-haired heroine is useful because of her protective holy magic. The pink-haired heroine looks down in deep worry as the noble reminds everyone that she sacrificed her healing power to protect them. Gesturing aggressively, the cowardly noble shouts that they should abandon the sword-wielding knight instead of the defenseless priestess. Exploding in absolute fury, the dark-haired woman points back and screams that he should be the one left behind instead of the knight. Clenching her fists, the dark-haired woman delivers a flawless counter-argument, pointing out that by his own logic, he is the true useless deadweight. The dark-haired woman smirks, mockingly pointing out that nobody would be able to carry him anyway. The dark-haired noble fumes with rage, raising his hand to angrily yell how she dares. The black-haired prince and the golden-haired Grand Duke shout the noble's name in startled alarm. The dark-haired woman deadpans in disbelief, realizing the arrogant noble is completely drunk. Her crimson eyes widen in sudden surprise as she registers an abrupt looming presence nearby. A firm hand suddenly grabs the noble's arm, commanding him to stop in a cold tone. Pinned down, the noble is sternly ordered by the black-haired prince to apologize to the woman. The prince warns the noble he will be left alone, shown on the survivor status list. Pressing him to the carpet, the black-haired prince repeats his demand for an apology. The golden-haired duke casually suggests using the useless noble as a protective shield instead. Staring down with cold eyes, the black-haired prince firmly repeats the noble's name. Face down on the floor, the defeated noble groans in pain and mutters a trembling, forced apology. The dark-haired woman crosses her arms, declaring she has no problem with the suggestion. Releasing his grip, the black-haired prince suggests they rest before continuing their escape. Observing the exhausted ladies, the dark-haired woman realizes they must cooperate to escape. Sitting comfortably, the dark-haired woman feels satisfied after speaking her mind so freely. Sitting on the floor, the brown-haired noblewoman weakly complains that her feet hurt. The Grand Duke suggests thicker socks or mate socks to relieve her sore feet. The dark-haired woman wonders in irritation why they are wasting time discussing socks. The Grand Duke asks if they can hold out, but the blonde noblewoman declines. A detailed map highlights their planned route to the left staircase and kitchen. The dark-haired woman reflects that walking is a lifetime of exercise for noble ladies. A sudden realization strikes the dark-haired woman as she remembers she has possessed the villainess's body. Inspecting her limbs, the dark-haired woman notes they feel perfectly normal and healthy. Wondering about her body's strength, the dark-haired woman asks the pink-haired priestess about her injured ankle. Summoning her magic, the pink-haired priestess tearfully apologizes for not being fully recovered. Kneeling, the black-haired prince gently reassures the priestess she has nothing to apologize for. Observing them, the golden-haired Grand Duke notes the prince's full attention is on Rina. Deciding on his approach, the Grand Duke determines he should follow Sarah instead. A dazzling, handsome smile lights up the Grand Duke's face against a beautiful, bright backdrop. The dark-haired woman is surprised as the Grand Duke gently takes her hand. Kneeling, the smiling Grand Duke is flatly rejected by the serious dark-haired woman. In chibi form, the Grand Duke teases her about her spectacular fall. The blonde noblewoman's expression tightens in sheer irritation as she demands that she stop showing off. The blonde noblewoman mockingly accuses her of craving attention, causing a sense of déjà vu. Stepping forward, the golden-haired Grand Duke politely intervenes, pleading with both noblewomen to stop their bickering. In chibi form, the dark-haired woman dryly notes she hasn't even spoken yet. Sparkles surround the handsome golden-haired Grand Duke as he eagerly offers to take care of her. The smiling Grand Duke takes her hand, sighing gently as he begins to treat her. A soft sound echoes as he carefully wraps her injured palm in a white bandage. The Grand Duke softly asks if she thinks he has a good body. The dark-haired woman bluntly asks if he ever looks in a mirror, flustering him. Blushing deeply, the Grand Duke shyly admits her blunt remarks embarrass him. The embarrassed Grand Duke holds her hand to his face, sighing softly. The dark-haired woman stares back in complete bewilderment, utterly confused by his sudden dramatic reaction. A sharp, sudden snap echoes as he cleanly breaks the heel off her blue shoe. Holding the heel, the prince agrees they should have done this from the start. In chibi form, the sweating woman notices everyone is carefully checking her mood. Looking serious, the prince firmly declares he does not consider anyone to be a burden. Standing in the elegant golden room, the prince takes responsibility, reminding everyone they are his guests. Squatting on the decorative carpet, the arrogant noble is heavily scolded about damaging the royal family's reputation. The prince firmly reminds him of his royal duty while the humbled noble remains silently frustrated. After their short break ends, the dark-haired woman decides to follow the prince to avoid the arrogant noble. A sudden, sharp clench of a fist betrays a rising surge of silent, suppressed anger. Kicking the wall in a childish tantrum, Pubri is immediately reprimanded by the Grand Duke for making dangerous noise. Glancing back, the dark-haired woman is thoroughly unimpressed by Pubri's pathetic display of anger. A sudden realization freezes her in her tracks as her eyes widen in shock. She quickly asks the prince if the infected servant could have used the hidden passage. The prince clarifies that the servant's passage is located directly adjacent to their initial starting room. Horror dawns on her as she questions if a severely injured servant would have shut the door. A sudden heavy rumbling sound echoes through the corridor as the hidden wall begins to shift. Spotting the danger, she screams at the top of her lungs for everyone to run. Chaos erupts as panic spreads instantly through the dim hallways of the estate. Looking around, she is shocked to see the prince kneeling to cast a magic trap amidst the chaos. Terrified for his safety, she angrily demands to know if he has a death wish. When the prince questions her delay, she admits she stayed behind only because he did. His glowing gold eyes lock onto her, filled with an intense, unreadable emotion. Before she can process his gaze, a sudden, firm grip wraps around her waist. Sweeping her off her feet, the prince effortlessly lifts her into a princess carry. He commands her to hold on tight as he prepares to make a break for it. With incredible speed, he dashes past the terrifying horde of red-eyed infected creatures. A spine-chilling roar echoes as the crimson-eyed monsters lunge forward in hot pursuit. As his magical trap shatters, she panics silently, fully aware she is completely at his mercy. The group sprints desperately down the grand staircase to escape the terrifying horde above. Taking the lead, the Grand Duke points him toward a path of safety. They dug into a side corridor, quickly pulling aside a heavy velvet curtain to hide. Slipping behind the heavy drapes, the exhausted survivors huddle together in a tense, silent room. When the prince tries to speak, she quickly hushes him to maintain absolute silence. A sudden chill takes over as they realize this hiding spot lacks a protective door. She despairs as their desperate situation continuously spirals further out of control. Her heart races even faster as she realizes just how intimately close the prince is. Regaining her composure, she politely asks the flustered prince to set her down. Peeking past the drapes, she assesses their slim chances of reaching the cafeteria undetected. Her hopes sink upon seeing a massive, dense cluster of infected blocking their path. A tactical map review highlights the daunting distance they must traverse to reach the kitchen. While she wishes for an alternative exit, the clueless Grand Duke loudly questions their hiding spot. The brown-haired noblewoman warns him to lower his voice, but the Grand Duke casually ignores her. The cheerful Grand Duke suggests they retreat further back to find a safer place to rest. The prince carefully inquires if there are any other viable routes out of their current location. His cheerful demeanor vanishes as the Grand Duke grimly confirms there are no other exits. Pubri and the blonde noblewoman gasp in horror, realizing they are effectively trapped. Listening to the growing noise outside, the dark-haired woman realizes their main escape route is completely compromised. Turning her attention inward, the dark-haired woman observes the quiet, tense blonde noblewoman. The blonde noblewoman turns around with a serious expression, preparing to ask a question. Dressing her as mascarpone, she asks the dark-haired woman if she has any useful magical items on hand. She questions if mascarpone's family magic item business has provided her with any self-defense gear. The blonde noblewoman flatly denies having any such items on her person. She angrily explains that she left everything at the palace, unable to foresee such a disaster. A memory flashes back, explaining why the blonde noblewoman has always been so prickly toward her. She recalls a past party where she had rudely scoffed at Sarah for violating the dress code. An enraged Sarah lunges at mascarpone in a flashback, highlighting their notorious and violent history. Following the violent confrontation, mascarpone was reportedly unable to go out in public for some time. In chibi form, the dark-haired woman realizes her questions were mistaken for sarcasm, apologizing for the misunderstanding. As the blonde noblewoman sits on the floor, the dark-haired woman asks the Grand Duke for permission to go inside. The black-haired prince questions her motive, but ultimately permits the dark-haired woman to investigate the grand interior. Walking alone, the dark-haired woman is weighed down by a sudden, heavy sense of personal responsibility. She regrets provoking the arrogant noble, realizing it caused the zombie attack that trapped the priestess. Determined to find a way out, she reassures herself that the novel's protagonist will surely survive. An imperial banner details the eternal glory of the Emperor of Broccoli, loved by 12 divine dragons. The dark-haired woman celebrates her success in successfully deciphering and understanding the imperial language characters. Spotting a golden chalice, she realizes this gallery displays valuable imperial family treasures that could be useful. She desperately prays to various gods and zombie movie directors to grant her strength to survive. Clenching her teeth, she desperately tries to recall survival tactics from the zombie movies she watched. The golden-haired Grand Duke startles her by suddenly appearing behind her and asking about the Golden Cup. He explains that the villa was originally a maternity ward where Prague spent his first 6 months. Leaning in close, the Grand Duke mischievously suggests that she can take the gold cup undetected. In chibi form, she flatly rejects his suggestion, warning him that stealing is wrong and he wouldn't accept it either. She firmly reiterates her decision, stating that she absolutely cannot accept the stolen treasure. Holding the gold cup, the golden-haired Grand Duke stares back at her with a serious, unreadable expression. The Grand Duke questions her assumption, asking if she truly believes he would refuse to accept it. Caught off guard, the dark-haired woman hesitates as she tries to find the right words to respond. The Grand Duke flashes a dazzling, gentle smile, asking if she thinks he would ever disadvantage her. Leaning in intimately, he teasingly asks if it is not only natural to report a thief. The Grand Duke laments her lack of trust, while she dryly thanks him for his fruitless protective efforts. The Grand Duke thoughtfully asks if she is still troubled by the events that occurred earlier. She remembers how the prince chose only to help Rena, realizing that is what he meant. Smiling calmly, she explains that people are only disappointed when their expectations are not met. Surrounded by glowing roses, she boldly declares that she had absolutely no expectations from either of them. Having prepared herself for action, Sarah has tied her hair up and put on solid black boots. A past memory reveals the cheerful Grand Duke playfully offering to tie her hair for her. She had refused his offer, remaining completely still in the past just to keep her hairstyle perfect. In contrast to her past self, she willingly tore her dress and wore a corpse's boots to survive. The Grand Duke stares at her in stunned silence, clearly impressed by her practical and drastic transformation. A sudden sense of unease arises as she notes that something is highly strange about the situation. She playfully questions him, asking if his ultimate goal is to obtain her vast fortune. Smiling warmly amidst the roses, she generously offers to give him all her assets if he desires. In chibi form, she proudly asserts her principles, declaring she would save her loved one over him anyway. The blushing Grand Duke points out that her crush, Plaha, chose to save Rena instead of her. Letting out a tired sigh, she decides to simply find another man since her crush is a pain. The Grand Duke's eyes widen in sheer shock and disbelief at her incredibly casual dismissal of Plaha. She resolves to avoid unrequited love, reflecting that these people belong to a completely different world. She amusingly notes that kissing tall men is a struggle, firmly stating she will not fall for them. The golden-haired Grand Duke blushes intensely, a warm, genuine smile spreading across his face. The Grand Duke laughs heartily, teasing her that she was the one who laughed first. She gives him a flat look, noting his mismatched expression makes her pity his long-suffering butler. She tells him to hurry back, but he suddenly pauses, pointing toward a discovery in the corner. Her red eyes widen in sudden alarm as she spots something unexpected ahead of them. A horrifying bloody corpse with a severed head lies on the floor behind a folding screen. Standing beside the shocked, dark-haired woman, the Grand Duke points out that he warned her to stay together. Kneeling by the bloodied body, the dark-haired woman is horrified to realize the Grand Duke killed this person. The golden-haired Grand Duke explains that Darjeeling beheaded the victim, making the terrified dark-haired woman resolve never to make an enemy of him. As she reaches toward the dark red arm of the deceased, the golden-haired Grand Duke questions her actions. She notices a glowing red gem in the dark figure's chest and decides to pocket it for later use. In chibi form, the golden-haired Grand Duke asks if the victim was an acquaintance as she inspects the body. She recalls that the deceased servant was the first person to speak to her after she possessed Sarah's body. Quickly brushing it off, the dark-haired woman shifts her focus back to their immediate situation. She whispers a gruesome plan to smear themselves in the corpse's blood to escape, leaving the Grand Duke speechless. The golden-haired Grand Duke amusedly rejects her bizarre movie-inspired plan, noting they wouldn't need to flee if it worked. She sighs, realizing her plan is unfeasible unless they were much shorter or had more corpses to cover them. Smiling cheerfully, the golden-haired Grand Duke playfully points out that he and Plaha are far too tall and sturdy. When the Grand Duke asks if she is afraid of corpses, the dark-haired woman comically insists that she is indeed terrified. Covering her face, she despairs that suddenly possessing a novel character is far more terrifying than facing dead bodies. Observing her distress, the golden-haired Grand Duke comments on how different she seems today, prompting her curious response. He reminds her that she claimed to be scared, yet she previously risked her life to rescue the knights. She argues that she couldn't just stand by, but he points out that her past self would never have cared. Realizing the original Sarah was likely a cold psychopath, she silently worries about her cover being blown. Resting his chin on his hand, the suspicious golden-haired Grand Duke is left deep in thought regarding her behavior. The dark-haired woman stares back in tense, wide-eyed silence, hoping to avoid further questioning. Returning to their escape dilemma, the golden-haired Grand Duke gestures with his hand and repeats why her plan won't work. Surrounded by white flowers, the golden-haired Grand Duke gently extends his hand and asks to search for another way together. She gasps in surprise as the handsome golden-haired Grand Duke takes her hand in a reassuring hold. As they continue moving, the dark-haired woman wonders why he keeps staring at her so intensely. When he worries about losing a valuable treasure, she casually reveals that the item is merely a replica. She asks about a chip in the gold cup, and he explains it was damaged during a confrontation at the temple. While the Grand Duke reflects on imperial succession, she is thoroughly impressed by his extensive knowledge. Moving along, the dark-haired woman carefully inspects the various treasures displayed on the shelves. Her attention is drawn to an ornate, palm-sized jeweled sphere that depicts the god of death. She examines a coronation tiara and a royal staff, remembering the details the Grand Duke shared about them. Reaching out, she picks up a gleaming gold skull from among the artifacts, wondering what it is. In chibi form, she recoils in horror upon learning the gold skull belongs to a young deceased royal child. The golden-haired Grand Duke playfully teases her with the skull, comically urging her to greet his late uncle. She screams in comically exaggerated shock, completely overwhelmed by the bizarre nature of the family relic. Her red eyes suddenly widen as a brilliant, unexpected strategy takes shape in her mind. She turns to the Grand Duke, confidently suggesting they might finally be on the exact same page. A soft pink floral screen marks her announcement that she has finally found a viable solution. Smiling brightly, the dark-haired woman runs back to the group while holding the gold skull. The black-haired prince looks confused as she excitedly presents the golden skull to him. In her haste, her boot slips on the floor, causing her to lose her balance with a shout. She desperately grabs onto the prince's clothing to prevent herself from falling backward. Her sudden trip sends her crashing into a very close, romantic embrace with the startled black-haired prince. Quickly standing up, she insists she is fine, while the prince, pink-haired girl, and Grand Duke watch in silence. The black-haired prince blushes intensely and sweats, feeling incredibly guilty about the sudden physical contact. She flashes a forced, nervous smile to cover her panic and embarrassment over the clumsy accident. Feeling awkward, she extends her hand before quickly pulling it back in absolute silence. Sitting dejectedly on the floor, she realizes with horror that everyone witnessed the entire awkward display. She looks away with flushed cheeks, completely mortified by the intense staring from the group. The memory of their sudden, accidental embrace replays, amplifying the awkward tension in the room. She blinks her wide red eyes in absolute shock as the embarrassing reality of the situation fully sinks in. Screaming in comical despair, she panics upon realizing that they indeed saw the entire intimate accident. Her panic turns to relief as she sighs, realizing that nobody is actually paying attention to her. The golden-haired Grand Duke turns away with a sweaty, incredibly tense expression. The black-haired prince holds the dark-haired woman in a very close romantic embrace. Flustered and blushing, the dark-haired woman frantically explains that she had no intention of kissing him, which the black-haired prince calmly accepts. She blushes intensely, screaming internally in absolute embarrassment over kissing his neck. She mentally reviews her bizarre survival steps so far, which included taking a corpse's boots and arguing with a scumbag. A new highly embarrassing third step is added to her mental checklist, accidentally kissing a total stranger on the neck. In chibi form, the dark-haired woman snaps and angrily complains that her height is not enough to reach the prince's ears anyway. Black-haired prince sighs and gently asks her to lend him her ear so he can speak to her. Leaning in close, the black-haired prince whispers his observation that their enemies likely rely on smell and sound to navigate. Showing him the golden skull, the dark-haired woman suggests they throw it to create a loud, distracting noise elsewhere. The black-haired prince agrees with her strategy, noting that their enemies' actions suggest they have almost no vision. Looking down at their feet, she hesitantly asks if it is truly all right to throw the skeleton of his deceased relative. The black-haired prince reassures her, explaining that protecting bones at the cost of their lives would not bring his ancestors peace. She is relieved that the prince does not care about strict ancestor worship traditions. Smiling brightly, she promises to give his ancestors a proper memorial service and ask for their forgiveness once they escape. In her wild fantasy, she happily imagines the handsome black-haired prince cooking a meal for them with his strong arms. She carefully peeks through a heavy red curtain to find the perfect spot to throw their distraction. The black-haired prince steps forward, placing his hand on her shoulder and volunteering to throw the golden skull himself. She readily hands the golden skull over to him, compliments his throwing ability, and leaves the task to the descendant. The black-haired prince winds up to throw the heavy gold skull with force. She covers her face and prays to the ancestors for guidance as the golden skull crashes loudly through a door. Hearing the loud crash, the glowing-eyed zombies turn their heads instantly toward the sudden crashing noise. A horde of red-tinted zombies immediately rushes toward the broken door, allowing her to peek out from behind the curtain. Hiding behind the curtain with the prince, she promises his ancestors a grand memorial with plenty of food for their help. The black-haired prince smiles gently at her, promising that he will do his absolute best to prepare it. The golden-haired Grand Duke watches their close interaction in quiet, brooding silence. The golden-haired Grand Duke steps in and smiles, telling them they should get moving without any further delay. Startled by his sudden presence, the black-haired prince and the dark-haired woman quickly agree to keep going. The group cautiously steps into a quiet room, noting that it looks safe enough for them to enter. A mess of utensils and pots suggests cooking was suddenly and violently interrupted. The dark-haired woman and the pink-haired girl examine the kitchen, noting that the scattered sugar looks like a deliberate act rather than an attack. Kneeling beside a bloodied body, the black-haired prince deduces that the chef took his own life, and they decide to decapitate it to be safe. The blonde-haired girl sits exhausted on the floor, refusing to take another step. The golden-haired Grand Duke encourages her, explaining that they are only one portal away from saving the rest of the palace. The blonde-haired girl despairs over the unknown state of the palace, complaining that someone like her would get killed immediately. In chibi form, the dark-haired woman angrily commands her to stop complaining and rest only after they have safely returned. The black-haired prince suggests she rest while they search, confident that the portal must be hidden somewhere in the kitchen. She suddenly pauses, realizing that they are currently standing right in the middle of the kitchen. Sitting dejectedly, the pink-haired girl wonders where all the servants who worked in the kitchen could have gone. The blonde-haired girl suggests they might have escaped through the portal, but notes that help would have arrived by now if they did. The prince points out that the kitchen door was locked from the inside, meaning the servants could not have escaped that way. The brown-haired girl in the orange dress complains that she is absolutely starving while the pink-haired girl huddles nearby. The golden-haired Grand Duke silently glances toward the side, deep in thought. Kneeling down, the golden-haired Grand Duke surprises the pink-haired girl by offering to apply medicine to her ankle. Blushing slightly, the Grand Duke asks her to let him handle it, explaining that it will be much faster if he does it. The golden-haired Grand Duke gently applies medicine and wraps her injured ankle. Watching them, the blonde-haired girl teases the dark-haired woman, asking why she doesn't just admit she is jealous of their closeness. The dark-haired woman stares back in complete confusion, wondering who is being addressed. She suddenly recalls twisting her own ankle earlier when she fell alongside the blonde-haired girl. Lying on the floor, the blonde-haired girl smugly tells her that no one will help her if she keeps pretending to be brave. Kneeling down, the blonde-haired Grand Duke gently holds her foot and asks if she sprained her ankle. The red-eyed woman insists it is nothing, explaining she was merely curious about some leaves. She walks away, silently wishing to find the portal soon while the crown prince watches her. In chibi form, she desperately cries out, begging to finally go back home. A dramatic narration notes that things in life have a habit of taking unexpected paths. Looking at bloodied meat, she nervously wonders if eating contaminated food would infect her. She decides to play it safe, picking up a clean glass jar from the shelf. Turning to the resting group, the red-eyed woman proudly announces she found some almonds. With a bright, dazzling smile, she holds up the jar of clean almonds in triumph. Suddenly collapsing onto the floor with a tired sigh, she expresses her desire to rest. Wide red eyes blink in sudden realization as a memory flashes through her mind. She inspects a glowing red jewel in her hand, remembering the glowing chests of the zombies. She recalls how the monster-dropped gems mysteriously floated and stuck to her hand like a game. Speaking to the gem, she is startled when the dark-haired crown prince suddenly answers her. In chibi form, she gasps in comical shock, wondering when he got so close. The yellow-eyed crown prince admits he was surprised that she would show concern for him. Her face turns blank with bewilderment, completely caught off guard by his sudden statement. She remembers yelling at him for almost getting himself killed during their hectic escape. She quickly apologizes, explaining that she was simply flustered and panicked in that moment. The crown prince silently gazes at her with an intense, unblinking, yellow-eyed stare. Kneeling beside her on the floor, the crown prince gently asks if her ankle hurts. Flustered, she tells him not to worry, while he asks her to relax her tone. She claims her boots are sturdy, secretly thinking he only cares about the pink-haired girl. The dark-haired crown prince maintains a quiet, serious expression as he listens to her. She looks away with a slight pout, insisting she is fine and not sulking. The crown prince looks down, softly stating that he meant something entirely different. He reveals Kypros told him about her looting corpses, making her sweat in nervous embarrassment. Showing him the red gem, she asks if he recognizes it, but he says no. She realizes with surprise that these dropped items are only visible to her eyes. She mentally debates playing dumb, imagining telling him she just liked how pretty they looked. The crown prince pulls out a fresh red apple, catching her completely off guard. Holding the apple, the crown prince sincerely apologizes for the trouble she has experienced. He promises to host her properly at the palace once they have safely returned. A sudden patter-patter of running boots echoes as a worried voice calls out. The red-eyed, dark blue-haired Darjeeling runs up, and she wonders if he thinks she is sulking. Blushing intensely, Darjeeling insists he was worried since he had promised to protect her. She recalls how hard Darjeeling works, fighting zombies and serving as the group's protector. Feeling bad for the overworked knight, she comically realizes he has the most pitiful role. Darjeeling points out her hands are also injured, but she dismisses it as minor. Looking down sadly, he asks if this is the first time she has been hurt. She reassures him with a gentle smile, saying there is a first time for everything. Darjeeling warmly admits he is truly grateful to have her by their side. A voice suddenly interrupts from behind, questioning her confusion over Darjeeling's gratitude. The blonde-haired Grand Duke appears with a bright smile, surprising her with a sudden arrival. In chibi form, the blonde Grand Duke notes she would have easily escaped without him anyway. He looks down at her boots, asking why she hid her sprained ankle from him. Covering his face in shame, the blonde Grand Duke deeply regrets causing her so much trouble. Standing up and dusting herself off, she tells him that his apology is unnecessary. Leaning in close, she pokes his chest and confidently tells him to have some faith. Touched by her words, the blonde Grand Duke clutches his chest as his heart flutters. The dark-haired woman in the red dress walks away as the two men watch her. The blonde-haired man asks where she is going, and the dark-haired woman resolutely replies she is going to pick a fight. She firmly plants her black boots on the floor as she walks with purpose. The dark-haired woman firmly commands someone to eat the food she is offering. The pink-haired girl is surprised when the dark-haired woman offers her bread, explaining it would otherwise go to waste. Crying tears of gratitude, the pink-haired girl eagerly accepts the bread after being asked if she was hungry. The dark-haired woman watches over the pink-haired girl, instructing her to chew her food properly. The dark-haired woman reveals she wrapped 2 extra pieces of bread for safekeeping. Holding the bread, the dark-haired woman confidently decides they can manage with just these provisions. Finding her pockets too small, the dark-haired woman improvises a storage spot for the bread in an emergency. A quiet rustle sounds as the bread falls, prompting the blonde-haired girl to criticize her undignified behavior. Feeling revived after eating, the blonde-haired girl suggests that they finally head toward the portal. The dark-haired crown prince interrupts with a serious expression, announcing he has something important to say. A sudden gasp of surprise escapes the girls as they turn their heads in alarm. The rest of the group shifts their attention, sensing the tension in his words. The dark-haired crown prince delivers the grim news that the portal is nowhere to be found. The group is left utterly shocked, with the dark-haired woman crying out in disbelief. The status menu displays the remaining survivors in the imperial kitchen, marking casualties. The dark-haired crown prince repeats his grim finding that he cannot locate the portal anywhere. The group gapes in total shock and confusion at the prince's disappointing announcement. The dark-haired prince explains he thoroughly checked the walls for hidden doors but found nothing hollow. Grinding his teeth in frustration, the chubby man angrily mutters that he knew this would happen. The chubby man yells that they should have abandoned the others, prompting Kypros to warn him. Overwhelmed by the terrible situation, the brown-haired girl bursts into tears of despair. The two girls descend into panic and despair, unable to believe their escape route is gone. The dark-haired woman quietly wonders if they need to cry so much, believing the portal is simply hidden. Sobbing, the blonde-haired girl points out that others surely know more about portals than the prince. The dark-haired woman lectures her, saying they must try if they want help and should save crying for later. The blonde-haired girl angrily retorts that she wouldn't cry if escape were possible, receiving a sarcastic reply. A sudden sniffle sounds as the blonde-haired girl wipes her tears while Sarah asks for her help. The dark-haired woman presses her temples in deep thought, trying to remember where portals are usually installed. The blonde-haired girl begins to analyze, noting that a portal requires a significantly large space. The narration explains portals are typically outdoors due to explosive force or placed underground if installed indoors. Hollow tap sounds as the dark-haired woman knocks on a wall, noting they seem too thin. She recalls the spray ointment found in the kitchen, questioning why the chef would need it there. The blonde-haired girl gasps in sudden realization, suggesting that the portal might be hidden underground. The dark-haired woman is struck by a realization about placing easily scattered items on top of underground entrances. The narration points out that sugar is heavily and selectively scattered in one specific area of the kitchen. A light scraping sound echoes as the blue-haired knight sweeps the scattered sugar aside to investigate the floor. The blue-haired knight gasps in excitement as he uncovers a hidden trapdoor directly beneath the sugar. The dark-haired woman is triumphant, while the blonde-haired girl notes a handle should appear upon proper authentication. The blue-haired knight deduces that the authentication must belong to the deceased head chef. Kipros explains that once the registered user is authenticated, the portal will respond directly to their will. A sudden heavy step sounds as the chubby man walks forward, declaring that this makes things easy. A dark chill fills the room as the chubby man smiles, holding up the chef's severed head. The blonde-haired Grand Duke is visibly unsettled, asking the chubby man to pause and discuss the matter first. The chubby man scoffs dismissively, arguing there is no time for discussion when their lives are on the line. The blonde-haired girl observes a red mark on the handle, wondering if it was painted for visibility. A sudden gasp of dread catches in the dark-haired woman's throat as she senses something is horribly wrong. The narration raises a chilling question as to why the chef took his own life instead of escaping. The narration questions the chef's suspicious motives for hiding the entrance as dread begins to settle. A sudden heavy metallic thud echoes through the room as the golden handle vibrates violently on the floor. Looking down with absolute dread, the dark-haired woman panics, believing there is no way the danger is trapped inside. Pushing her out of the way, the chubby man selfishly demands to escape through the newly found entrance first. The chubby man recklessly demands to open the entrance, ignoring the desperate warnings of the group as they try to hold him back. Red light glows ominously from the opening door as terrifying eyes begin to emerge. The yellow-eyed crown prince and Kipros shout in panic, desperately urging everyone to close the dangerous door immediately. Realizing the trapdoor handle has broken, Kipros cries out in panic as he falls backward on the floor. Demonic red-eyed monsters burst forth with terrifying screeches, signaling that they are already too late to contain them. Mascarpone warns the group that it is useless to try closing the portal until it is fully opened. With a sickening squelch, Darjeeling stabs a sword into an emerging monster, grunting under the heavy physical strain. The dark-haired crown prince acts quickly, using a glowing golden wire to restrain the attacking beast. With a sharp whoosh, the crown prince pulls his golden wire tight, urgently commanding the others to close the door now. The crown prince sweats in nervous exhaustion as he struggles to hold back the beast. The chubby man shrieks in absolute terror, pleading for help as a red glowing monster corners him on the floor. Kipros desperately commands Pubri to use the sword to defend himself, but Pubri completely refuses out of sheer cowardice. Pubri screams in terror as the shadows wrap around him, but no one can reach him in time. A horrific squelch splatters blood across the floor, confirming a fatal blow has been dealt in the darkness. Fueled by rage, the dark-haired woman lifts a massive blood-stained silver platter high above her head. Kipros looks up in shock as the crown prince rushes past him toward the ongoing danger. The three girls watch the brutal confrontation unfold with expressions of pure horror and disbelief. With a thunderous crash, Sarah crushes the red monster's skull using the heavy platter as Pubri cowers behind her. The bloody platter clatters loudly onto the stone floor, leaving a grim trail of splattered blood. Sarah clutches her bleeding hand, silently telling herself to stay strong because the injury is not a big deal. Her hand squeezes tightly as fresh blood drips onto the floor, making a soft dripping sound. With a sudden rustle, her bloody hand grabs Pubri by the collar of his suit. Glaring with intense red eyes, Sarah furiously warns Pubri to stop endangering others, telling him to die alone next time. A status screen displays the group's survivor information, revealing that Kimon has been officially deceased. Sarah leans in close, her gaze burning as she repeats her warning to Pubri to die alone if he wishes. Trembling with fear, Pubri defensively stutters, questioning if she truly thinks she can speak to royalty with such disrespect. The crown prince steps forward, his gaze turning icy as he calls out Pubri's name. The crown prince reminds Pubri that this is his second offense, warning him of severe consequences if there is a third. Sweating profusely, Pubri frantically apologizes and begs for mercy, promising he will not cause any more trouble. Sarah quietly observes Plaha's intimidating demeanor, wondering what he did to make Pubri so absolutely terrified of him. The crown prince maintains his serious, intense expression as he looks back at Sarah. Plaha notices her injury and gently insists on treating the reopened wound on her hand. Rena eagerly volunteers to help heal her, but Sarah firmly tells her to prioritize healing her own sprained ankle first. Looking down at the shattered jars on the floor, the crown prince notes that this location is no longer usable. Sarah reluctantly suggests that they must change plans and find the portal located in the garden instead. The Crown Prince silently locks eyes with Sarah, their close proximity highlighting a subtle tension between them. Politely excusing himself, Plaha steps closer to her to begin tending to her bloodied hand. He carefully wraps a white bandage around her hand with gentle, precise movements. Sarah is surprised when he uses his golden wire weapon as a cord, questioning if that is safe to use. Plaha calmly explains that the cord's sharpness is fully adjustable, to which Sarah understandingly accepts. Finishing the bandage, Plaha announces he is done, prompting a soft thank you from the grateful woman. In chibi form, Sarah suddenly remembers something important, blinking in realization. Crouching by the fireplace, Sarah curiously asks the Crown Prince how they can start a fire in this kitchen. As the broken door handles rattle, the narration suggests crushing their heads or using fire to defeat the monsters. Picking up a massive iron pot, Plaha looks surprised and questions if she intends to set the monsters on fire. Plaha explains they cannot defeat them all individually, suggesting they craft a makeshift Molotov cocktail with the kitchen materials. The blonde-haired man asks the group who among them actually knows how to construct a Molotov cocktail. The dark-haired woman raises her hand, silently signaling her willingness to take on the task. Blonde-haired man asks in surprise if she genuinely knows how to make one. The dark-haired woman admits her only knowledge on the matter comes from watching movies. Amused by her unusual source of knowledge, the blonde-haired man remarks that she is truly unique. The dark-haired woman suggests distributing the weapon to the unarmed members for self-defense. Entering a kitchen for the first time, the confused Crown Prince innocently asks about fire-starting tools.
The dark-haired woman chides the Crown Prince for proposing a plan without even knowing how to start a fire.
Blonde-haired man laughs at the Crown Prince's embarrassment, while the dark-haired woman points out that none of the highborn group know either. The dark-haired woman sheepishly admits she only knows how to turn on a modern stove, which isn't helpful here. Stepping forward to resolve the issue, the blonde-haired girl confidently offers to show them how to start a fire. The blonde-haired girl raises a magic spear, preparing to demonstrate her fire-starting capability. She explains that she will ignite the fire using the power of her magic spear. The blonde-haired girl explains that swinging the spear with careful aim will easily generate fire. The dark-haired woman grips the spear and awkwardly mimics the motion to confirm she has the right idea. With a forceful swing, she successfully ignites a bright, roaring fire in the kitchen's fireplace. The blonde-haired girl warns that using the magic spear consumes significant stamina and requires charging. The blonde-haired girl explains that the spear recovers one charge every 30 minutes with a maximum of 10 uses. When asked how to track the remaining charges, the blonde-haired girl admits they must count the uses manually. The dark-haired woman realizes they cannot make Molotov cocktails due to the limited charges of the magic spear. Disappointed by the discovery, she carefully lowers the magic spear. The dark-haired woman hands the spear to Kipros, noting he seems more skilled and less likely to break it than the Grand Duke. Kipros humbly accepts the weapon, while the dark-haired woman secretly admits she found the spear a bit too heavy. Kipros informs the Crown Prince that they are now prepared to attempt their escape. The Crown Prince explains that the main portal they used is located just beyond the garden. The map displays the boundary of the villa, indicating the route toward the main portal. The map highlights a hunter's cabin located along the path between the villa and the garden. The dark-haired woman worries about the number of undead monsters ahead, frustrated that she cannot recall the details from the novel. The Crown Prince warns that the complex open garden offers no shelter, making panic highly dangerous if they get surrounded. She continues to rack her brain, trying desperately to remember the layout of the garden from the story. The blonde-haired man proposes they hide in the hunter's cabin while he and Kipros scout ahead. She sighs in frustration, lamenting that they are back to square one after thinking the kitchen was their goal. Resigned to their reality, she quietly resolves to make the best of the situation. The Crown Prince offers a pair of sturdy boots taken from a corpse to Rina, urging her to change. Overjoyed and deeply grateful, Rina happily accepts the boots without any hesitation. Under a soft, glowing night sky, the group cautiously walks out into the biting cold air. The brown-haired girl suddenly gasps in terror as a strange sound echoes nearby. The dark-haired woman quickly raises a finger to her lips, silencing the panicked girl. The chilling roar of nearby zombies echoes through the night, causing Kipros to tense up and alert. The group realizes that there are 6 terrifying zombies lurking directly in front of the cabin. The horrifying zombie screeches menacingly, threatening to block their path of escape. Sweating in suspense, Kipros and the blonde-haired man look down, realizing they are heavily outnumbered near the cabin. Kipros grimly notes that the monsters seem to have successfully found a way inside. The dark-haired woman confidently suggests a plan of attack, proposing they take down the monsters one by one. The blonde-haired man playfully teases her fighting stance, but she tells him to save the small talk. The blonde-haired man confidently tells her that there is no need for her to fight. Kipros swings his glowing magic sword to strike down the enemy. With a clean, powerful slash, a zombie's head is completely severed in an instant. Kypros quickly drops to a defensive stance as the Crown Prince stands ready behind him. Seeing their effortless combat skill, the dark-haired woman realizes her worries were entirely in vain. Plaha draws his weapon, preparing to strike. With a swift motion, Plaha whips his glowing golden wire. A sharp golden wire cleanly slices off the red monster's head. Plaha strikes a smug, glowing pose, flashing a confident wink. Sarah observes his self-absorbed attitude, mentally deducting points for his arrogance. A zombie corpse lies covered on the ground, hinting at more garden dangers. Kypros instructs the others to wait inside with Darjeeling while he and Plaha scout outside. Sarah expresses deep concern, suggesting they take Darjeeling with them for safety. In chibi form, Sarah frantically asks if they will be all right and demands their immediate return. Chibi Sarah turns away, complaining that Plaha is grinning way too much. Plaha gently places a glowing magical wire weapon into Sarah's hands. Sarah wonders why he is giving her the weapon, and Plaha explains it is for self-defense. Sarah inwardly doubts her ability to fight, questioning if he thinks she is that brave. Plaha reassures her that the wire adjusts its sharpness according to the wearer's will. He demonstrates how easily she can cut the wire whenever she wants to. Plaha asks if she wants to test it, making her look around for a target. Chibi Sarah spots a wooden chair, wondering if she can slice its leg off. Crouching low, Sarah carefully wraps the glowing wire around the chair leg. With a triumphant shout, Sarah successfully slices the chair leg with the wire. Chibi Plaha praises her work but quickly discourages her from doing it professionally. Kypros announces their departure, promising the group they will return within the hour. Rina watches Kypros leave, tears welling in her eyes as she calls after him. Rina dramatically bids Kypros farewell while Sarah rejoices over acquiring a rare item. Plaha playfully complains to Sarah, asking if she plans to see him off too. Men stare in silent disbelief as Sarah ignores them to focus on her wire. Turning to leave, Kypros tells Plaha to go as Plaha notes Sarah has changed. Sarah sighs in immense relief once the men finally exit the cabin. Dropping to her knees, the brown-haired girl collapses and shivers from the cold. Huddled together on the floor, the girls worry about their family's safety. Sarah looks pityingly at Mascarpone's cold feet, feeling deeply sympathetic for her. Sarah remembers her past training in archery and martial arts to build her stamina. Gripping her forehead in sheer exhaustion, Sarah desperately wishes she could go home. A close-up of the brown-haired girl shows her looking down with a sad, gentle smile. Rina and the brown-haired girl smile together, wishing this was all a dream. The brown-haired girl anxiously asks how much time has passed, feeling it has been over an hour. Sarah suddenly pops in to clarify that it has actually been less than 10 minutes. In chibi form, Rina and the brown-haired girl laugh, finding the situation hilarious. Sarah changes the subject, asking how long it takes to reach the portal. Rina answers with a gentle smile, estimating it takes about 20 minutes to reach. Sarah realizes that the men must fight through monsters and walk back the entire distance. Rina looks apologetic, prompting Sarah to comfort her while secretly worrying they are dead weight. The brown-haired girl turns to Sarah, expressing her surprise at Sarah's bravery. She recalls the moment Sarah courageously defeated a red monster with the platter. The brown-haired girl smiles warmly, looking deeply impressed by Sarah's actions. Looking down with a sad expression, the brown-haired girl apologizes for being useless. She compares herself to Sarah and Rina, who both possess incredible combat and holy powers. She notes that even Mascarpone contributed by discovering the portal entrance. Seeing her distress, Sarah quickly reassures the weeping girl that she does not need to worry. Sarah gently asks Rina and the girl if they have ever seen moving corpses before today. Hearing their quiet denials, Sarah warmly reassures the brown-haired girl, praising her incredible composure. Consomme gratefully tells Sarah that she is incredibly kind. Consomme tearfully admits she never expected Sarah to comfort her during such a time. Smiling warmly, Consomme extends her hand in a gesture of friendship and trust. Sarah smiles warmly as she gently grasps Consomme's outstretched hand in silent solidarity. The four young women find solace sitting together on the wooden floor. Pubri grumbles in the corner as an hour and a half passes. The scene cuts to the men fighting desperately, but the three have not returned. Stark's survivor chart confirms that the three scouting men have not returned. Consomme asks about post-escape plans, and Sarah confidently declares her desire to drink coffee. Rina happily joins in, dreaming of a hot cup of coffee with cream. Sarah specifies her preference for iced coffee, but the grim reality remains that the men haven't returned. Despite their heavy hearts and growing fear, none of the girls show their anxiety. Pubri rudely tells the girls to shut up, complaining about their useless chattering. Pubri angrily accuses Sarah of being the loudest and demands she use her head to think. Pubri complains about passively waiting for help, while Sarah dryly notes he is doing the same. Pubri hysterically panics about having no sword fighters left and worries they have been abandoned. Pubri insults Sarah for receiving the magic cord, while she silently fumes at his irritating attitude. Sarah sighs and confidently reassures Pubri that the scouts would never abandon them. Sarah pauses thoughtfully, preparing to explain exactly why she is so certain they will return. Sarah explains they will return because the girl they like, Rena, is still here. Sarah reasons that as male leads, abandoning the heroine would disqualify them as protagonists. Sarah confidently asserts that the men will undoubtedly return to rescue Rena as well. Rena and Consommé look deeply moved, noting Sarah's support despite her own feelings. Chibi-Sara is baffled by their assumptions, knowing the male leads never liked her anyway. Consommé tearfully sympathizes, though Chibi-Sara notes there is no need for her sympathy. Sarah stands up, declaring that since the promised hour has passed, they must prepare for the worst. Sarah resolves to rely on her own mental strength to protect the fragile group. Rena hesitantly suggests going out to look for the men to help them. Consommé worries about getting lost, making Sarah realize how massive the garden truly is. Sarah advises waiting until sunrise to head out, proposing they secure their safety for the night first. Rena asks how they will prepare as Sarah begins to handle the glowing magic wire. Sarah smiles as she suggests using the magic wire to set up traps against the corpses. Sarah recalls watching the Crown Prince use the cord as a trap around pillars. Sarah explains the trap will decapitate intruders, but Consommé worries their friends might get caught in it. Sarah reassures them that she can control the cord's sharpness at will. Ouch! Sarah cries out after getting a splinter, prompting Rena to ask if she is all right. Sarah dismisses the pain, tying the cord at a perfect height to trap any incoming zombies. Sarah points to where the other end should go, and Consommé eagerly volunteers to help. Mascarpone silently stands up, her expression tense as she prepares to join them. Sarah is surprised when Mascarpone offers to help, though the blonde girl claims she is reluctant. Consommé points out a high nail on the doorframe as a potential spot to tie the wire. Sarah agrees with the spot, but struggles to reach the high nail. Rena offers a broken chair, and a startled Sarah dryly wonders if Rena's trying to kill her. Rena offers herself as a stepping stool, but Sarah asks if her spine can heal if broken. Pubri scowls and grumbles at the girls for doing whatever they want. Sarah asks Pubri to help them, but he stubbornly questions why he should. Pubri smugly suggests that women should only rely on men in times of danger. Sarah fumes internally, thinking she would accept help from anyone taller, regardless of gender. Realizing it is a waste of time, Sarah asks Rena to hold the broken chair instead. Rena points out the chairs are broken, but suggests the three of them hold it together. The pink-haired girl encourages the others to hold the broken chair steady together. The black-haired woman orders them to hold the chair steady before jumping up on three. The black-haired woman screams in shock, complaining about the sudden jump while demanding they support her. The four exhausted girls collapse onto the wooden floor, catching their breath after their hard work. The black-haired woman complains of exhaustion while the brown-haired girl expresses her deep thirst. The black-haired woman casts a silent, contemplative glance to the side as she rests. The black-haired woman notes that there is still no sign of any approaching danger. Another girl quietly agrees, confirming the tense, silent atmosphere inside the dark room. The fat man dismisses their trap as useless, prompting the black-haired woman to mock his laziness. The black-haired woman sits up, silently wondering how much time has passed since their departure. The fat man grumpily demands food, complaining loudly about his hunger in the silent cabin. The girls stare back in stunned, silent disbelief at his shameless demand for food. The black-haired woman loses her temper, angrily confronting him about his selfish attitude. Rena is caught off guard when the fat man asks if there is any food left. Rena apologetically admits that they had already finished all the remaining food earlier. The black-haired woman defends Rena, but the fat man argues his larger frame requires more sustenance. The black-haired woman mockingly asks when he ever exerted himself, suggesting his only effort was screaming. The angry man threateningly warns her to watch her mouth, irritated by her commanding attitude. The black-haired woman remains entirely unfazed, coolly daring him to show what he will do. The black-haired woman firmly warns him to adjust his attitude or prepare to face her consequences. Enraged by her defiance, the man raises his hand to strike her while shouting an insult. A sudden frantic cry rings out as the brown-haired girl desperately commands them to stop. The black-haired woman freezes in complete shock at the unexpected outburst. The weeping brown-haired girl brandishes the heavy chair, fiercely ordering the man to lower his hand. She screams at him again, fiercely demanding that he keep his hands to himself. The man calls her dead weight, but the brown-haired girl tearfully rejects his insult. The weeping girl passionately points out that everyone is contributing while he does nothing but mock them. She furiously accuses him of treating them like garbage to mask his own uselessness. Brandishing the chair, she commands him to sit down and shut up or face punishment. The completely defeated man cowers in the corner, earning praise from the delighted black-haired woman. The black-haired woman happily reveals hidden warm bread rolls to share with the group. The dejected man looks up in disbelief upon realizing there is actually food left. The black-haired woman confirms the food's existence and playfully asks if he wants some. The hungry man meekly admits his desire for the food, completely humbled. The black-haired woman eats the bread herself, refusing to share with someone so arrogant. The other girls happily munch on their bread rolls, completely ignoring the miserable man. The girls share a warm, joyful moment together, finding comfort in their small feast. The brown-haired girl sheepishly realizes she handled the food right after touching her feet. The black-haired woman declares survival is the only priority, jokingly swearing them to secrecy about dirty hands. Rina hesitantly asks if she can raise a personal question to the black-haired woman. Rina asks if she used to adore the crown prince, and Sara calmly admits she did. Rina curiously asks how she can remain so incredibly composed about her past feelings. The black-haired woman explains her feelings simply cooled off, leaving her old self behind. Sara admits her selfishness, stating she desires to be someone's absolute #1 priority. Just as she describes her ideal partner, a hand suddenly bursts through the wooden wall behind her. The black-haired woman shrieks in comical terror as a familiar voice calls out her name. The ashy-haired crown prince stands outside the broken wall, looking slightly exhausted but safe. The blonde-haired man mistakes the glowing wire for a spiderweb, but the prince identifies it as a trap. The black-haired woman questions why they broke the wall instead of simply knocking.
The blonde-haired man explains the prince warned him not to recklessly touch the front door.
Kypros supports Plaha, explaining Plaha knew Sara would set a trap. A stumbling step is taken as Rina panics over Plaha's leg. Consomme and Rina express deep worry, asking if he is injured. Plaha claims it is just a cramp while Rina begs to check on him. Sara silently watches, highly skeptical that it is just a simple leg cramp. Plaha explains they faced 100 corpses and cutting them down was useless. Plaha recounts having to pass through the area to reach the main portal. Kypros narrates how Plaha used the magic spear to set the corpses ablaze. Kypros notes that Plaha recklessly exhausted all the magic spear's remaining firepower. Kypros proudly praises her prediction, but Sara dryly questions if now is the time. Sara is stunned that Plaha single-handedly exhausted the magic spear without collapsing. Darjeeling joins in, describing the terrifying battle as a truly hellish sight. A massive blaze erupts as the fire from the corpses spreads to the plants. Sara is utterly horrified to learn that their only escape route is ablaze. Plaha urgently insists they escape immediately before the fire spreads even further. Plaha explains that about half of the corpses are still wandering around. Consomme worries about encountering the remaining 50 corpses still wandering the area. Kypros cheerfully warns that suffocation or burning alive is a much bigger concern. Plaha urges everyone to hurry as they prepare to leave the room. Sara panics at the absurd idea of sprinting through a burning garden. Plaha coordinates the escape plan, assigning leaders and guarding the rear. Plaha strictly instructs everyone to keep running forward no matter what they hear. The group braces themselves, preparing to sprint into the burning garden. Massive flames consume the forest, creating a terrifying wall of fire. Sara stands in disbelief, facing the overwhelming sea of fire ahead of him. Sara is stunned to discover the garden is actually a giant hedge maze. Sara quickly backtracks with a thumbs up after accidentally insulting Plaha's mother's hobby. Kypros signals for silence as they navigate through the burning maze. Kypros yells out a sudden signal for everyone to start running. The group begins sprinting frantically through the burning path of the maze. Sara refuses to leave Consomme behind, urging her to keep running. Sara guides Consomme through the maze, shouting out navigation directions. A massive burning tree suddenly collapses right in front of the running girls. Sara screams as she desperately pushes Consomme out of harm's way. Sara watches in horror as the fiery tree crashes down directly toward her. Sudden swift movement intercepts Sara as she begins to fall. Sara is swept up into a tight protective embrace amid the raging fire. The survivor chart updates showing Kimon is deceased while the others struggle to survive. Thunderous collapse of burning debris shakes the ground behind them. Sara looks up in stunned silence, realizing who has just saved her. The dark-haired man cradles her safely on the ground, shielding her from danger. Sara takes comfort in the sturdy arms and chest holding her securely. Sara recognizes the familiar touch of the arms that have held her before. Sara gasps softly as she finds herself incredibly close to him. A gentle blush colors Plaha's face as he gazes down at her. The two share a quiet, intimate moment amidst the surrounding chaos. Plaha smiles warmly, expressing relief at catching up despite getting slightly scorched. Sara dryly notes that his injuries are far worse than just a bit. Plaha jokes about learning how to start a fire for cooking, leaving Sara baffled. Plaha offers his hand to Sara with a charming, gentle smile. Plaha and Sara shout out to each other frantically amidst the raging forest fire. Consomme and Pubri run towards them through the smoke, desperately asking if they are okay. Consomme and Pubri shout through the smoke, while Sara silently notes Pubri's unexpected presence. Consomme resolves to move the rocks herself, while Pubri hesitates when asked to help. Pubri selfishly flees from the danger, leaving a shocked and dismayed Consomme behind. Sara fumes in absolute irritation over Pubri's incredibly cowardly and useless behavior. Consomme steals her resolve, deciding to push the heavy stones aside all by herself. Sarah urgently commands Consomme to run away immediately without looking back. Sarah promises they will catch up soon, but Consomme hesitates to leave her behind. Plaha urges Consomme to escape to the exit while Sarah demands she join the others. Sarah strictly orders Consomme to secure the next area, dismissing her tearful protests. Consomme stands in stunned emotional silence as she processes their selfless commands. Consomme reluctantly turns around and runs towards safety, crying as she leaves them. Plaha and Sarah stand hand in hand, facing the massive pile of burning rubble ahead. Sarah wonders how long he will hold her hand before thanking him for saving her. Plaha reacts with a confused mumble to her sudden expression of polite gratitude. Plaha continues to hold her hand tightly, looking down at her with a gentle gaze. Sarah wonders if he likes his name after addressing him formally as Crown Prince Plaha. Plaha quietly questions her about why she is staring so intently at him. Sarah anxiously points out their dire situation, questioning if they will survive the spreading fire. I understand you want me to read that text faster, but my instructions are just to read it back without any acknowledgement. If there's another way I can help with that, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just read it at a standard pace. Plaha squeezes her hand even tighter as they brace themselves for the next move. Plaha confidently declares they will forge their own path, leaving Sarah completely bewildered. Plaha unleashes a massive, powerful punch directly at the pile of stone boulders. The giant barrier crumbles instantly, leaving a shocked Sarah to question what just happened. Plaha calmly commands her to follow him as he leads the way through the opening. A zombie suddenly lunges at Sarah from the side, making her scream in terror. Plaha easily dispatches the threat, prompting Sarah to happily thank him for his protection. Another terrifying zombie silhouette emerges from the shadows directly behind them. Plaha swiftly strikes down the approaching zombie, keeping Sarah safe once again. Consomme calls out to Sarah from across the path, urging her to hurry over. Sarah grabs Consomme's hand, asking if she is safe after fearing the worst. Consomme smiles warmly at Sarah, deeply relieved and exhausted after their frantic run. Sarah praises her as a one-shot wonder, making Consomme incredibly relieved. Sarah notices Consomme's bare, bloodied foot and asks how she managed to run like that. Red zombies shake the iron fence as someone yells to hurry over it. Kipros frantically waves them over, asking Plaha if he has the gate key ready. Plaha realizes the gate is locked from the other side, causing sudden panic. Sarah quickly proposes they climb over the brick wall to escape the zombies. Plaha leaps over the wall first, promising to catch the others on the other side. Pubri scrambles up the wall, selfishly demanding assistance without worrying about anyone else. Kipros urges Sarah to go first, but she insists the weaker and injured must climb first. Kipros and Plaha look back in tense silence as Rina warns of the approaching zombies. Sarah is shocked as her red dress gets severely caught on the fence. The glowing red zombies begin scrambling over the iron fence in pursuit. Mascarpone turns back in complete shock as a loud sound echoes behind her. Mascarpone urges Sarah to climb, but Sarah insists on being used as a stepping stool. Sarah fiercely commands Mascarpone to step on her shoulder and climb over. The survivor chart displays the current status of the participants, highlighting Kimon's death. Sarah screams at Mascarpone to use her as a stepping stone and climb up. Kipros pleads with Sarah not to sacrifice herself as he lifts Consomme over the high wall. Plaha reaches to help Rina over the wall, urging her to hurry without losing her composure. Sarah ignores the warnings and insists they must climb immediately to escape the danger. Mascarpone tearfully steps onto Sarah's back, trying to muster the strength to climb. Mascarpone reaches for the top of the wall, realizing it is still too high. Sarah insists that Mascarpone use her body as a step without hesitation to climb up. Mascarpone looks down in stunned disbelief at Sarah's selfless and desperate plan. Stealing her resolve, Mascarpone finally steps on Sarah's shoulder to pull herself up. The force of the jump sends Sarah crashing backward to the ground with a loud thud. Safe on top of the wall, Mascarpone expresses immense relief that her neck didn't break. Mascarpone collapses in pain on the other side as Rina and Consomme cry out to her. Kipros stands over the fallen Sarah, asking if she is still able to stand. Kipros swiftly sweeps Sarah off her feet, lifting her bridal style in one smooth motion. From the top of the wall, Plaha extends his hand, urging Sarah that it is her turn. Kipros hoists Sarah upward to help her reach Plaha's outstretched hand. A red-eyed zombie suddenly lunges forward, grasping frantically at Sarah's boot. Kipros struggles to support Sarah as she kicks desperately at the grabbing zombie. Sarah finally tumbles over to safety, landing on the grass with a sigh of relief. Plaha catches Sarah and grins, teasingly remarking that she looks beautiful from below. Sarah scrambles away in shock, highly flustered by Plaha's sudden flirtatious remark. Plaha sits back on the grass, complaining that his human cushion was far too hard. Sarah fumes in annoyance, questioning if this is really the time to be joking around. Sarah reflects on being embraced by both the Crown Prince and the Grand Duke. Standing in flustered silence, Sarah wonders if this attention is a perk of her possession. Kipros leaps down from the wall, dismissively telling Plaha to stop talking nonsense. Kipros walks over to Sarah, asking if she is unharmed after the fall. Kipros gently touches her forehead, making Sarah wince in pain as he examines her wound. Sarah humorously worries that a scar in the middle of her forehead will open her third eye. Touching her jaw, Sarah notes her body aches and her teeth hurt from clenching them. Kipros cradles Sarah's cheek gently, staring deeply into her eyes with sudden, quiet intensity. Sarah freezes in surprise as Kipros continues to hold her face in his hands. Plaha watches them jealously, muttering that touching Sarah's face without permission invites a punch. Kipros looks away and advises they stop talking and move before the wall crumbles. Mascarpone asks if they are close, and Plaha points toward the artificial lake and portal. Mascarpone admits she forgot the route, while Plaha notes their morning escape was unexpected. Plaha remarks on her memory lapse, while Sarah privately attributes it to her soul possessing this body. Rena wipes her face and urges the group to hurry before the threat catches up. Sarah looks at her bloodied hands, lamenting that her wounds have reopened and her nails are ruined. As Sarah stares at her hands, Mascarpone quietly calls out to get her attention. Sarah turns around in confusion, wondering what Mascarpone wants to say. Mascarpone stands in blushing, hesitant silence, struggling to find the right words. Mascarpone takes Sarah's hand, hoping that Sarah is finally starting to warm up to her. Sarah is completely bewildered as Mascarpone awkwardly thanks her for the help climbing the wall. Mascarpone shyly confesses she would have been doomed without Sarah, admitting she owes her one. Creepy versions of the girls argue over who owes whom, reminding Sarah she risked her life. Sarah smiles, wondering if people in villainous novels always overreact to minor acts of kindness. Mascarpone looks remorseful, admitting Sarah helped her despite the cruel things she used to say. Mascarpone looks down in shame, confessing she wouldn't have been able to do the same. With tears welling up in her eyes, Mascarpone begins to apologize for her past behavior. Mascarpone tearfully says sorry, leaving Sarah feeling deeply touched yet slightly overwhelmed by her sincerity. Sarah looks down softly as she apologizes for having been rude to her before. Smiling gently, Rena accepts her apology and agrees to be in her care from now on. Laughter echoes under a clear sky as the tension between the girls finally melts away. Hearing water, Mascarpone and Consomme notice the air becoming much clearer as they walk. Walking through the bright forest, Sarah notes the lingering tension before a sudden sound startles her. Chibi-Sara guesses in excitement upon spotting the glowing portal standing near the lake. A sudden rustling sound echoes from the dense, shadowed bushes nearby, interrupting their momentary relief. Sarah gasps in sudden fear as a cold sweat breaks out on her neck. Slithering groans echo as terrifying, dark silhouettes of a zombie horde emerge from the shadows. Despairing that zombies block the portal, Sarah panics at the sheer cruelty of their situation. Trapped between a burning garden behind them and a zombie horde ahead, escape seems impossible. Surrounded by advancing monsters on all sides, the desperate group draws their weapons to fight. Realizing this is the final deadly hurdle, Sarah knows they must survive or perish here. Sudden swift movement cuts through the tense atmosphere as someone steps forward. Walking with determination, Rena steps past her companions toward the approaching horde of monsters. The group watches in stunned silence as Rena walks ahead, prompting them to call her name. Rena turns back slightly, her eyes suddenly glowing with a powerful, intense blue light. A silent, heavy stillness hangs over the battlefield as they prepare for what comes next. Her companions stare in utter bewilderment as Rena silently prepares to unleash her power. Channeling an immense force, Rena's eyes burn with an even brighter, ethereal blue energy. Enveloped in a brilliant holy aura, Rena clasps her hands together in deep silent prayer. Sarah watches in complete shock, realizing she is witnessing a classic heroine awakening event. Kipros frantically yells for Rena to hang on while the dangerous horde closes in on them. Stepping forward, Rena raises her hand as a swirl of divine magical particles surrounds her. A massive crackling bolt of lightning strikes down from the sky with a deafening roar. Raising her arm high, Rena summons colossal pillars of blue lightning to obliterate the threat. Dumbfounded by the sheer scale, Sarah jokingly wonders if Rena serves Thor, the god of thunder. Cascading bolts of blue electricity strike the zombies, instantly disintegrating them into nothingness. The remaining companions stand completely frozen, their mouths agape at the terrifying display of power. Rena stands calmly, holding a crackling sphere of lightning in her hand as the storm settles. The enemies are utterly annihilated, proving Rena's magic far surpasses even the strongest Imperial leaders. The glowing magical aura begins to fade, leaving a calm, quiet atmosphere in its wake. Exhausted, Rena begins to collapse, but Plaha quickly catches her as Sarah calls out in worry. The companions wonder how her magic became so incredibly powerful compared to her simple villa blessings. Weakly, Rena admits she does not know, but only cared about saving all of their lives. Sarah angrily scolds Rina for recklessly risking her life, though Rina calmly notes she feels perfectly clear-headed. Mascarpone and Kasame marvel that even high priests or ancient magic users lack such immense power. An ally notes God's favor for Rina, while Sarah realizes this power activates during life-threatening danger. The narrative proclaims Rina as a true saintess who receives the deep love of God. Sarah bitterly wonders if she is abandoned by God, destined to play the role of a jealous villainess. Smiling softly, Rina continues to glow with a serene, holy aura of divine light. Kypros praises her performance, questioning if he should officially address her as the saintess now. As they walk, Chibi companions discuss temple hearings and express their amazement at her powers. Sarah ponders if Rina can speak to God, wondering if God knows why she possessed this body. Sorrowfully, Sarah wishes she could ask to be sent back to her original world immediately. Plaha holds Rina, promising to report her heroic actions and recommend her official saintess welcome. Mascarpone smiles with profound joy and relief, glad that they have all survived the ordeal. Enthusiastic cheers of gratitude and praise for the saintess echo up toward the clear sky. Resolving to worry later, Sarah heads back to the palace, hoping things will resolve themselves. Kypros pulls Sarah close from behind, smiling warmly as he offers to treat her injured hand. Plaha expresses worry, but Sarah quickly brushes it off as she insists she is fine. Looking away, Sarah wonders why Plaha is fussing over her instead of celebrating Rina's saintess awakening. From the portal, Kypros and the girls urgently call out, prompting them to hurry. Staring softly back, Sarah feels a sudden warmth as she looks at her companion. Rina takes Sarah's arm with a bright smile, eagerly inviting her to go together. Kypros watches them with a quiet, intense gaze as they prepare to depart. A sudden nervous sigh escapes Sarah's lips as she hesitates on the threshold. Mascarpone and Consomme warmly welcome her, happily declaring that she finally belongs with them. Taking a deep breath, Sarah firmly steps onto the glowing magical platform of the portal. Looking around, Sarah notes that the glowing portal structure strongly resembles an ancient temple. The entire group stands together inside the magic circle as the portal's energy begins to swell. Enveloped in a brilliant golden aura, Kypros prepares to activate the teleportation magic. Kypros advises the group to remain patient while the magical energy takes time to fully charge. Comically, Mascarpone and Consomme complain about their dirty attire, wishing they could change immediately. Mascarpone playfully teases Sarah about her scent, drawing an outraged gasp from Consomme. The girls bicker lightheartedly, comparing who managed to stay cleaner during their frantic escape. Sarah feels overwhelmed, realizing that both Imperial leaders are suddenly showing her intense attention. Staring blankly, Sarah reflects on her initial isolation compared to her current supportive companions. A gentle, quiet sense of relief washes over her as she enjoys this rare moment of peace. Sarah wonders if her soul's possession will finally end once the portal is fully activated. Reaching out toward the glowing arch, she holds on to the hope of returning to her original world. Overwhelmed by homesickness, Sarah quietly whispers her desire to go home, leaving Plaha confused. Misunderstanding her tears, Plaha sympathetically assumes the terrifying ordeal has simply broken her usual cold composure. A sudden, chilling tension snaps them back to reality as the portal begins to react strangely. Clutching her head, Sarah recalls the original villainess's tragic past of parental discrimination and low self-esteem. Sarah is startled by the sudden influx of tragic memories that were never mentioned in the Nala. Consomme happily clings to Sarah's arm, celebrating their imminent and long-awaited return. Consomme smiles warmly at Sarah, promising to invite her to a proper tea party. A sudden violent shove pushes Consomme forward, shattering their peaceful moment in an instant. A horrific, red-glowing beast suddenly materializes behind Consomme, plunging the scene into absolute terror. Blood splatters across the scene as Sarah screams in pure, unadulterated horror. Flashbacks of judgmental nobles whispering highlight the cruel society she struggled to survive in. Broken and bloodied, Sarah collapses to her knees as her desperate hopes crumble to pieces. Staring blankly ahead, Sarah's blood-stained face reflects the profound trauma of the sudden attack. Kneeling in stunned silence, she struggles to comprehend the tragedy that just unfolded. Her eyes remain wide and vacant, completely consumed by the nightmare of the attack. Back in the palace, the court cellists halt their performance in sudden confusion and panic. A frantic voice echoes through the grand hall, questioning the group's unexpectedly early return. Armed royal knights sprint through the palace corridors to investigate the sudden commotion. Exhausted and injured, Kypros clutches his head in pain, weakly dismissing the worried guards. Panicked guards shout for the court physician upon realizing the crown prince has returned wounded. Sarah remains collapsed on the polished floor, completely numb to her surroundings. A single blood-stained slipper lies abandoned on the floor, symbolizing their tragic loss. The terrifying red-glowing monster lunges forward with a deafening screech of pure malice. A nearby noble screams in sheer terror as the beast attacks without warning. The frantic push is shown once more, sealing Consomme's tragic fate. Consomme reaches out desperately as the dark, horrific shadow closes in on her. Plaha desperately restrains Sara as she screams Consomme's name in absolute agony. Tears stream down Consomme's face as she softly calls out Sarah's name one last time. Consomme screams in terror as the dark, thorny shadows violently swallow her whole. Sarah bitterly reflects on her past thoughts, realizing she is the one who was a burden. Pubri stands in sweating, anxious silence as Sarah confronts him from behind. Sarah glares back with glowing red eyes, furiously demanding to know why he did it. Sarah confronts Pubri directly, demanding that he give her a straight answer. In a painful memory, Consomme desperately screams for the chaos to stop as debris falls. Consomme smiles warmly in a memory, happily promising to invite Sarah to a tea party. Back in the present, Sarah screams in absolute rage, questioning why Consomme had to suffer. Consumed by overwhelming fury, Sarah turns away and screams in agonizing frustration. Sarah screams out her rage while Kypros and Plaha watch her with deeply troubled expressions. Mascarpone, Rina, and another companion watch the unfolding confrontation with tense, worried expressions. Pubri defensively asks why he is being blamed and if he should have died instead. Pubri shrugs his shoulders and trembles, trying to deflect the blame from himself. Sarah lets out a heavy, exhausted sigh as blood drips down her face. Sarah thinks Pubri could have dodged, lamenting that Consomme would have been saved very soon. Sarah notes that survival instinct took over, acknowledging anyone would have done the same. Pubri stands defensively with his arms crossed, refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing. Clenching her fist, Sarah bitterly resolves to prioritize her own survival when the time comes. Pubri panics as heavy footsteps echo, realizing Sarah has seen through his selfish actions. Plaha steps forward, strictly ordering his men to isolate Pubri immediately. Plaha reveals Pubri was scratched by a corpse, which Pubri desperately tries to deny. Sarah holds her head in pain, urging them to hurry before Pubri's symptoms appear. A sudden wave of dizziness washes over Sarah as she struggles to remain standing. Sarah suddenly collapses, and Plaha catches her in his arms while screaming her name. Plaha frantically begs Sarah to hang on as they rush her across the marble floor. A sudden high-pitched scream for Lady Sarah echoes down the empty palace hallway. Outside the palace, panicked questions arise regarding the symptoms and what occurred at the villa. Sarah lies completely unconscious, with a faint trace of blood still marking her lips. A gentle hand rests reassuringly on Sarah's shoulder as she remains unconscious. Playa carries the unconscious Sarah bridal style, stepping forward with absolute determination. Pubri mockingly claims Sarah is just acting, accusing her of fainting to avoid excuses. Mascarpone and Rina angrily tell Pubri to stop, saying his good person act is too late. Plaha continues to cradle the unconscious Sarah, calling out Pubri's name with cold authority. Plaha casts a freezing glare at Pubri, reminding him that the victims were his guests. Plaha states he never expected Pubri to perform heroic deeds like saving someone from fire. Plaha warns Pubri not to belittle others' good deeds just because he cannot do them. Plaha admits he was far too lenient with Pubri simply because they are family. Plaha holds Sarah close and formally announces that Pubri is infected with the disease. Plaha carries Sarah away, explaining that the highly contagious illness poses a threat to everyone. Plaha strictly orders his men to send Pubri back to the island immediately. The surrounding crowd panics in terror, wondering if they are safe from the disease. Knight sees Pubri as Plaha orders the portal sealed, warning them of Pubri's teeth. Pubri screams Plaha's name in desperate terror as he is dragged away by knights. Kypros steps forward, arguing that sending Pubri back to the island is too extreme. Pubri claims he is clean, while Kypros offers to personally guide him to safety. A system notification appears instructing them to survive on the island for 10 days. Kypros smiles and promises to pick Pubri up after 10 days as guards drag him. Plaha questions whether Kypros actually intends to return and pick Pubri up. Kypros stands in silence, his expression blank as he processes Plaha's question. A close-up reveals Kypros's mouth tightly shut as he remains completely silent. Kypros brushes his hair back with a cold smile, flatly refusing to return for him. Pubri, bound and blindfolded, is dragged away by guards as he pays for his cowardice. Pubri looks back over his shoulder in distress, addressing the crown prince with desperate plea. Pubri begs Plaha to take proper care of the unconscious and severely injured Saa. Pubri tearfully notes that Sarah pushed herself far too hard during their frantic escape. Plaha carries the sleeping Sarah in his arms, his expression filled with deep concern. Plaha suddenly freezes in shock as he realizes Sarah is in critical condition. Sarah begins bleeding from her mouth, prompting Plaha to frantically call for a physician. Consumed by panic, Plaha screams in desperation as he holds her limp body tightly. Kypros urges Plaha to calm down while the surrounding crowd questions the moving corpses. Mascarpone warns of political backlash while others frantically ask about Lady Consomme's fate. Plaha fiercely commands everyone to shut up, his yellow eyes blazing with absolute fury. Rina runs forward in sheer panic, calling out to the crown prince in distress. Plaha asks Rina to treat Sarah immediately, and Rina promises to do her best. Plaha grimly realizes that her severe injuries likely occurred when they crossed the fence. A close-up reveals blood dripping down the side of Sarah's pale, unconscious face. Her forehead wound and exposed bruised shoulders are highlighted as she remains unconscious. Her severely scratched and bloodied legs are shown wearing heavy, ill-fitting military boots. Blood slowly pools on Sarah's chin as she struggles to breathe while unconscious. Plaha carries her forward silently, the weight of her suffering pressing heavily on him. Rina tries to use her magic but cries out in despair upon failing. Plaha looks on in cold silence, bitterly cursing the uselessness of their god. Rina tearfully blames herself, but Plaha gently reassures her that she is not to fault. Plaha comforts Rina, reminding her that they only survived because of her and Sarah. Plaha orders his butler to accommodate the guests and ensure Darjeeling receives proper treatment. Plaha hands over the remaining immediate tasks to Kipros as he carries Sarah away. Plaha announces that the severely injured Sarah will be treated at the palace. Plaha strictly commands his subordinate to deliver the news of the tragedy to the Duke. Plaha warns of impending war, ordering strict inspections for anyone entering the palace. Plaha orders Marquise Diane to be informed immediately of Lady Consomme's tragic passing. Plaha sits silently by Sarah's bedside in her grand chamber, reflecting on her past. He recalls how he initially had absolutely no interest in her or her well-being. Plaha remembers Sarah sitting completely isolated at a massive empty dining table. Mascarpone watched her from a distance with an expression of profound pity and sadness. Plaha wonders why she remained silent instead of calling out for help when injured. Looking at her sleeping face, Plaha is filled with quiet, painful regret. He realizes she must have believed she was destined to be abandoned by everyone. Sarah was fully aware of the bitter truth that she was widely disliked by others. He recalls a rare, fleeting memory of Sarah smiling brightly while holding hands with Pupri. Plaha is left utterly at a loss for words as he processes his deep regret. He remembers her fiercely screaming at him for recklessly putting his own life in danger. He recalls her lifting a massive blood-stained stone block with sheer, desperate determination. Sarah insisted with absolute resolve that the weak and injured must be saved first. He remembers a rare moment of Rina smiling warmly amidst their harsh trials. The memory of Sarah standing fearlessly amidst the raging forest fire flashes before him. He remembers her brilliant, captivating eyes shining like a mesmerizing spark amidst the flames. Plaha admits that her wild, destructive nature completely enchants him despite the grave danger. Kipros holds up a silver wire noting that Plaha dropped it during the chaos. Kipros explains that a guard found the dropped wire and returned it to him. Kipros asks if he wants to take it back, but Plaha quietly declines. Kipros reminds Plaha of his heavy duties, and Plaha reluctantly leaves Sarah's bedside. Kipros suggests that the other man can leave her in his care instead. Kipros notes that keeping her in the crown prince's quarters indefinitely is inappropriate, earning a sharp look. A tense silence falls as the black-haired man responds with a piercing, silent glare. A memory surfaces of the blonde-haired man gently holding the dark-haired woman in his arms. Kipros advises the crown prince to prioritize treating his own injured arm first. Sarah rests quietly in a deep, peaceful sleep, temporarily free from her pain. Kipros looks on silently, turning the delicate silver wire over in his hands. The crown prince admits to himself that he harbors a deep, silent dislike for Kipros. A system interface confirms that the survivors have successfully gathered in the palace safe zone. Sarah recalls Consomme's genuine happiness at helping, contrasting sharply with the memory of her own desperately running, bloodied feet. Sarah laments how her companion completely disregarded her own physical well-being. Her friend's joyful promise of a future tea party contrasts painfully with Sarah's regret. A sudden gasp escapes as Sarah's brilliant red eyes snap wide open. Sarah lies awake in an unfamiliar, luxurious bedchamber as morning light filters in. Sarah observes her surroundings with growing unease, immediately recognizing she is not in her own home. Disoriented, the young woman desperately tries to piece together how she arrived there. She questions whether escaping the zombie den was futile and wonders if death is her only escape. Gripping the sheets tightly, she resolves to find a way to leave this place immediately. Flashes of violent encounters, bloodshed, and her own desperate survival efforts flood her mind. She clings to the desperate, impossible hope that she can simply forget all the horrors. A terrifying vision of her companion screaming in agony amidst darkness and blood torments her. An oppressive red haze of blood and violence lingers heavily in her mind's eye. She desperately tries to convince herself that the horrific ordeal was just a highly realistic nightmare. She attempts to detach from the trauma by pretending the tragedy was merely a movie. A lingering dark dread continues to cloud her consciousness despite her attempts to cope. Her attention is caught as she suddenly bolts upright, casting the bedsheets aside. With cold, unwavering determination, she resolves that she must return home as soon as possible. The heavy curtains are suddenly drawn open, revealing two maids who stare in utter shock. The maids scream in excitement to announce her awakening, drawing the attention of another woman. The blonde-haired woman rushes forward to embrace her, crying out in immense relief. Sarah freezes in sheer confusion, utterly bewildered by the woman's intense weeping embrace. Sarah notices how thin her visitor's arms are and the visible bruising on her skin. She silently observes the light blonde hair of the woman clinging so tightly to her. Sarah realizes this woman resembles her mother but feels entirely different from the mother she knows. A system card identifies the woman as Sarah's mother, who lightly dismisses the near-fatal ordeal. Her mother claims she prayed to the god of beauty, prompting Sarah's dry mental critique. Sarah tentatively steers the conversation toward the horrific events that took place at the villa. Her mother confirms an emergency meeting is scheduled, leaving Sarah to ponder how magic combats zombies. Sarah quietly wonders how her mother actually perceives the unfolding crisis. Her mother details the cosmetic treatment she probably administered while Sarah lay unconscious. Her mother criticizes her for running, declaring that visible leg muscles on a woman are unsightly. Her mother obsessively boasts about using a lavish, expensive elixir to keep Sarah's skin perfectly smooth. Sarah sits in confused silence, trying to decipher her mother's bizarrely superficial response. Her mother suddenly shrieks in dramatic horror as a loud thud rattles the room. A terrified maid quickly begs for forgiveness, scrambling to shut the open window. Her mother catches her breath, leaving Sarah to watch her strange behavior in quiet suspicion. Her mother cheerfully recalls that a strong-willed young woman has already delivered a cure. While her mother lists royal gifts, Sarah grows increasingly unsettled by her bizarrely calm attitude. Her mother notes a letter from Darjeeling, questioning his penmanship, while Sarah mentally disputes the assumption. Sarah clenches her dress, deeply disturbed by her mother's refusal to address the zombie thread. Sarah privately contemplates the mystery surrounding her noble mother's status, her absent father, and their cold relationship. She observes her mother silently grinding her teeth, realizing that reasoning with her is utterly impossible. Sarah tentatively asks about the emergency meeting, and her mother explains she is summoned as a key witness. When asked for the exact schedule, her mother calmly responds that the meeting is set for the day after tomorrow. Sarah is deeply frustrated by the lengthy delay while her mother obsessively focuses on skincare prep time instead. Her mother suddenly reaches forward with a swift grip, tightly grabbing Sarah by the face. She aggressively critiques the stubborn dark circles under Sarah's eyes, suggesting a dangerous chemical cover-up. Her mother's manic obsession deepens as she bizarrely muses about replacing Sarah's red eyes entirely. Trapped in her mother's erratic hold, Sarah mentally screams in horror, realizing the woman is completely unhinged. Meanwhile, in another part of the palace, Plaha sits in quiet exhaustion, resting his face in his hand. He recalls Sarah's fierce, desperate yelling during their escape, questioning her reckless bravery to save him. He reflects on her physical intervention, wondering if she actually struck him to force his retreat. Plaha realizes that despite everything, her face remains constantly at the forefront of his mind. Nearby, Kipros quietly hopes that Sarah does not blame herself for the tragedy that befell Lady Consomme. Approaching Plaha's side, Kipros gently questions if the prince was lost in thought about Sarah. Sitting down, Kipros explains that his attempts to schedule an immediate emergency meeting with the emperor failed. Kipros laments that the political delay threatens his ability to return to his own territory. He is cut short as Plaha suddenly approaches him with a dark, threatening aura. In a sudden flash of anger, Plaha aggressively grabs Kipros by his decorated shirt collar. Kipros stammers in sheer confusion as the prince holds him in a tight, forceful grip. Plaha glares down with burning yellow eyes, demanding to know Kipros's true intentions. A system interface maps out the safe zones established at the Duke's mansion and the palace. Back in the chamber, Kipros remains pinned as Plaha continues to grip his clothes tightly. Plaha's piercing gaze remains locked onto him, refusing to let the Grand Duke deflect the tension. Back in the bedroom, the mother continues her bizarre rants about facial flaws and beauty remedies. She continues her manic ramblings, wishing she could swap out Sarah's eye color for something brighter. Sarah nervously points out that waiting 2 days is highly dangerous with potential monster attacks looming. Her mother goes completely silent, her face darkening into a cold, sinister expression. She abruptly dismisses the warning and commands her bowing maids to bring her a larger mirror. Her mother explains the delicate political tension, noting that public knowledge of the security breach would invite utter chaos. She warns that the imperial family's absolute authority would be completely destroyed if the truth got out. With memories of the previous conflict still fresh, she notes that another devastating riot could easily erupt. Frustrated by the stubborn delay, Sarah angrily demands to know why they are wasting precious time. Her mother mentions Plama and Kipros's proposals to recruit noble knights and construct defensive checkpoints. She rejects their suggestions, claiming that prioritizing the outer borders leaves the wealthy nobles completely defenseless. Pointing out the massive financial costs, she insists that securing their own estates must happen first. Sarah bitterly realizes that the nobility is completely willing to abandon commoners to save themselves. Her mother dismisses the concern and suddenly checks Sarah's waist, happily noting she has lost weight. Her mother smiles with a deeply unsettling, hollow grin that sends shivers down Sarah's spine. She suddenly drags Sarah forward, forcing her to look directly into the glass mirror. As her head is held tight, Sarah stares into the mirror, completely stunned by her reflection. Gazing at the reflection, Sarah is shocked to recognize her own face staring back. Upon closer inspection, she realizes that the facial features and mole perfectly match her original body. She begins to wonder if she actually transmigrated dimensions rather than possessing someone else's body. She touches her hands, realizing her high physical stamina matches her original self perfectly. She reflects that if she had possessed the real Sarah, she would be completely weak and exhausted. She ponders if she entered a novel where a character was modeled exactly after her real life. Sarah watches in disbelief as her mother completely ignores the existential crisis to focus on the mirror. Her mother screams in dramatic horror, obsessing over a tiny new wrinkle on her face. Suddenly changing her mood, her mother smiles warmly and invites her to the dining hall for breakfast. The maid quietly observes Sarah from behind, thinking she is a highly elusive character. Sarah turns to demand the exact location of her personal belongings from her maid. The maid responds with confusion, asking which specific belongings Sarah is referring to. Sarah recalls her torn red dress, her lost slippers, and a hidden red gemstone. The maid dismisses her items as dirty trash and casually reveals she threw them away. Sarah stares in absolute shock and horror upon learning her items were discarded. Sarah frantically opens a drawer to search, refuting the maid's claim that her items were trash. Sarah furiously orders the maids to retrieve her belongings or locate the incinerator. The maid flashes a fake sweet smile to pacify her angry young mistress. Sarah looks highly annoyed, wondering if her own servant is subtly mocking her. Sarah collapses onto her bed, sighing as she wishes to return to her original world. Wondering how to return without a phone, Sarah resolves to find the study. The gray-haired maid stops her, stating Sarah lacks permission to enter the study. Sarah stands completely bewildered as the maid explains the young master uses the study. At breakfast, Sarah sits in disbelief over the minuscule portion of food served. Her mother cuts her meat, asking if the tiny portion is too much for Sarah. Sarah stares at her plate, silently fuming over the household's completely absurd rules. Her mother happily boasts about Sarah's weight loss, glad to avoid embarrassment at the tailor. Determined to access the study, Sarah asks about her brother's current whereabouts. Her mother explains her brother took gold to the racetrack and has vanished. Sarah points out the danger of her brother and the servants going missing. A terrifying vision shows her mother ravenously eating raw meat dripping with fresh blood. Shaken by the bloody sight, Sarah nervously asks if her brother also eats very little. Her mother darkly warns Sarah to endure starvation to maintain a tiny waist. The mention of restriction triggers a sudden, chilling sense of dread in Sarah. A painful memory of young Sarah crying and vomiting from severe starvation flashes back. Sarah realizes these painful, repressed memories belong to the original owner of her body. She understands how this abuse twisted Sarah's personality and made the servants look down on her. She laments how the servants relentlessly mocked the original Sarah and dehumanized her. Placing her fork down, Sarah credits her survival in the zombie den to her stamina. Disgusted by her toxic family, Sarah abruptly announces she is going out. Our mother calmly questions where Sarah is going as she stands from the table. Sarah aggressively clutches her hair, determined to escape the suffocating walls of her home. Stepping outside into the fresh air, Sarah deeply understands why the original Sarah hated her home. Walking past the palace guards, Sarah resolves that she is already sick of this place. Having fled the mansion on impulse, Sarah quietly ponders where she should go next. She sadly recalls that Sarah had no real friends to visit because everyone hated her. Realizing her isolation, she bitterly compares her lonely situation in this world to Wonderland. Looking down, Sarah reflects that being entirely alone is also her own reality back home. As she walks through the bustling capital, Kipra suddenly appears in the crowd nearby. Sarah's eyes wind in complete surprise as she spots the blonde man ahead. Kipros looks equally stunned and breaks into a cold sweat upon seeing Sarah. A system notification establishes a temporary safe zone around Sarah and Kipros in District 3. Meanwhile, the dark-haired woman named Darjeeling stands menacingly over a bound prisoner who begs. The prisoner furiously threatens Darjeeling, who merely glares back with icy red eyes. Darjeeling mockingly reminds her sexist prisoner that his life will end by a woman's hand. Darjeeling firmly grips her captive's face, preparing to deliver her final brutal judgment. She bids him farewell as dark magic circles materialize beneath the terrified captive. A grotesque red-eyed beast lunges at the captive, who screams in absolute terror. The captive's desperate pleas for help are swallowed by a blood-red haze of violence. Lost in his thoughts, Plaha gazes downward with a somber, distant expression. Sitting alone on his bed, Plaha reflects on the overwhelming events that recently unfolded. He turns his face slightly, his eyes filled with quiet, lingering melancholy. He holds a brief letter from Darjeeling, urging Sarah to recover and return quickly. Upon unexpectedly running into Sarah in the bustling streets, Kipros asks what she is doing there. Sarah casually notes they were bound to cross paths and asks if he is comfortable walking unattended. Kipros gives a cheerful thumbs up, explaining he simply wanted to experience walking alone for once. Striking an elegant pose, Kipros boasts about borrowing Plaha's clothes and asks if they suit him. Sarah dismisses his question, but Kipros wonders why she claims ignorance despite her supposed fashion expertise. Kipros points out her reputation for luxurious shopping sprees, leaving the modern Sarah thoroughly bewildered. Sarah inwardly laments that her real-world self wore the same outfit repeatedly, joking about a minimalist style. Kipros notices the injury on her arm, causing her to glance down at the wound. Kipros reacts with overly dramatic concern, making Sarah recoil in absolute disgust. Kipros questions her highly offensive reaction, and she lamely apologizes that it simply slipped out. Despite her cold response, Kipros smiles down at her with genuine, warm affection. Sarah suggests he should have used the high-grade medication she sent him to heal his own wound. Confused, Kipros inquires about the medicine, prompting her to ask if he depleted his supply on her behalf. Kipros quickly deflects, claiming he would never go to such extreme lengths for her benefit. Laughing off the tension, Kipros remains bright and cheerful as Sarah lets out an exhausted sigh. Telling him to do as he pleases, Sarah suddenly catches a delicious scent drifting through the air. Her eyes widen with sudden excitement as she pinpoints the source of the delightful aroma. A charming boutique cafe filled with exquisite desserts stands just behind a glass door. Enticed by the sweet smell, Sarah walks directly into the shop with Kipros following closely. Noble patrons immediately scatter in fear, leaving Sarah wondering if her reputation is truly that terrible. Kipros ignores the scene and casually orders a sweet beverage with whipped cream on top. When Sarah mentions she lacks funds, Kipros generously offers to cover the cost of her drink. He smugly reminds her that he owns her favorite shopping establishment, offering this as a minor VIP perk. Sarah argues they should pay separately, clarifying she has enough money for herself, but not for him. Kipros instantly morphs into a dejected puppy, whimpering sadly at her refusal to let him pay. Exasperated by the petty argument, Sarah gives up and reluctantly accepts his offer to pay. Kipros asks for her order, and she reflexively begins to ask for an iced Americano. Realizing they lack modern terminology, she quickly rephrases her request to a strong, cold black coffee. The maid serving them remarks that ordering a chilled coffee is an exceptionally rare request. With their orders ready, Kipros notes he has nowhere else to go and accompanies her. Sarah sits down at an elegant table situated next to a serene indoor pool. Seated opposite each other, Kipros asks her to clarify her previous comments about his behavior. Sarah tells him he does not need to force himself to be polite to someone he dislikes. She quietly stirs her drink, her gaze fixed on the dark, swirling coffee. Kipros sits quietly across from her, the peaceful light reflecting off the nearby water. Reassuring her that everything is fine, Kipros watches as Sarah takes a large sip of her drink. With a sudden cough, she instantly spits out the beverage upon realizing it is horribly lukewarm. Kipros bursts into laughter, admitting he suspected the drink lacked a sufficient amount of ice. Sarah clutches her head in frustration, flatly rejecting his teasing offer to share his sweet drink. Calming down, Sarah questions why a prominent Grand Duke is wandering around alone and visiting cafes. When Kipros claims he was simply bored, Sarah dryly tells him to stop playing around. He explains that Rina is busy proving her holy powers while Plaha is occupied elsewhere. He details how Darjeeling is recovering and Mascarpone returned home, leaving him stranded far from his territory. Kipros reveals he was wandering to clear his head when they randomly crossed paths. Sarah asks why he must stay, inwardly suspecting he has deeper motives than merely resting. A brief memory reveals Plaha expressing his intent to depart immediately after completing his official report. Kipros explains that his family elders refuse to let him return home because they fear potential corpse outbreaks from portals. Curious about his schedule, Sarah asks Kipros when he will finally be permitted to go home. Realizing the situation, Sarah asks if his return depends on the outcome of the upcoming emergency meeting. Kipros confirms this, explaining that portals are highly restricted and situated only in a few key imperial cities. Sarah recalls that his territory contains one of these portals because of his prestigious ducal standing. Sarah points out that corpse incursions are unpredictable, but Kipros notes portals only operate in one direction. Kypros asserts with a serious glare that he will not tolerate being barred from returning to his territory. Kypros playfully asks if she would visit him in jail, to which she dryly promises to consider it. In chibi form, Kypros asks where she's going, and she jokes about seeking refuge before retracting it. Watching him lean close across the table, Sarah wonders when they began acting like comfortable comrades. Kypros leans in close with a sudden murmur, catching Sarah off guard as she looks up in confusion. Leaning extremely close to her face, Kypros gazes at her with sudden, intense focus. Surprised by his sudden proximity, Sarah blinks in utter confusion as she gazes up. A system notification establishes a temporary safety zone around Sarah and Kypros in District 3. Kypros reveals that Lady Consomme's mother, Marchioness Diane, refuses to accept her daughter's tragic passing. Shaken by this grim news, Sarah stares back in absolute shock and silent horror. Kypros adds that the family is avoiding a funeral to prevent officially acknowledging her death. Marchioness Diane is shown smiling gently in a memory, insisting she won't accept her daughter's death without visual proof. Kypros's green eyes narrow slightly as he finishes repeating the heartbreaking words of the grieving Marchioness. Sarah bows her head in quiet contemplation, realizing that Consomme's family name is actually Diane. She fondly recalls Consomme's cheerful smile, noting how her normal last name contrasted with her unusual first name. Kypros explains that Marquise Diane challenged Poubry's father to a duel to defend his late daughter's honor. He details that the aged Marquis, who lacks an eye, will likely perish in the duel unless lucky. He notes the Marquis harbored no resentment toward them, expressing gratitude that his daughter's reputation remained unsullied. An aerial view of the estate appears as Kypros muses Consomme would have preferred dying over endangering others. Highlighting her vulnerability, Kypros emphasizes that the terrified Consomme lacked the capacity for such noble thoughts. A painful flashback shows Consomme crying out in pure terror as Dark Claws seize her in her final moments. Looking at Sarah with deep sympathy, Kypros gently assures her that Consomme's death is not her fault. Sarah silently stirs her tea, her mind lost in a wave of somber reflection. Kypros leans forward and cradles Sarah's head, asking if she carries this painful guilt with every death she witnesses. Sarah softly claims she is already aware of this reality, prompting Kypros to ask why she still suffers. Staring blankly, Sarah's red eye reflects the lingering, painful image of Consomme crying out in her final moments. Shaken by memory, she remembers desperately declaring that the tragedy was not her fault. In her mind, she screams that she did absolutely everything she could to save her. The heavy question of what else could have been done hangs in the air. Sitting in the quiet cafe, Sarah asks if he has experienced this heavy pain throughout his campaigns. Kypros listens quietly as she asks if he felt this way every single time someone died. A silent inquiry ponders if he carried such a heavy emotional burden all along. Sarah admits she must adapt to loss, but confesses she cannot easily pretend to be fine. She remembers the terrifying zombie attack on her villa, realizing she had no time to mourn Consomme then. She contrasts her past survival struggles with the peaceful tranquility of a gentle afternoon. Sitting quietly in the sunlit cafe, she finds herself mourning her lost companion over a cup of lukewarm coffee. Clutching her head in deep sorrow, she wonders if these agonizing feelings of guilt will ever lighten. Gently touching her face, Kypros candidly tells her that the painful burden of grief will never fade. Kypros holds her closely, gently explaining that the weight of these losses is permanent. He recalls his own first battlefield experience at 13, where a subordinate died to protect him. When Sarah tearfully asks how she should cope, Kypros tells her to simply keep living with the burden. Kypros stands solemnly in a sunlit graveyard, vowing to live on to honor those who have died. Clutching her fist tightly, Sarah listens as Kypros tells her that keeping this grief is proof she is alive. Kypros gazes at her with a soft, blushing smile full of warm, quiet affection. Sarah looks up with tear-filled red eyes as Kypros gently touches her cheek. Sarah defiantly insists she is not crying while tears visibly stream down her face. Kypros smiles warmly at her while maintaining his gentle hold on her cheek. He playfully questions her denial, teasingly asking what the moisture on her face represents. Kypros pinches Sarah's cheek, causing her to glare at him in annoyance. Kypros explains that provoking her anger is a sure way to stop her crying. Sarah's expression softens slightly as a single tear falls down her cheek. Sarah wipes her eyes in a quiet moment of vulnerability and lingering sadness. Kypros kneels on the floor before Sarah as she sits at the table, quietly weeping. A close-up reveals Kypros, identified by the narration as Sarah's longtime childhood friend. In chibi form, Sarah grumpily laments crying in front of someone she claims to dislike. Sarah clutches her head, mortified at having had an emotional breakdown in a public cafe. Sarah thanks Kypros for ordering the desserts, admitting she is starving after neglecting her meals. Sarah eats a pastry, silently noting that her basic physical needs remain unchanged despite everything. Sarah is caught off guard when Kypros suddenly brings up memories of their childhood together. Text panels describe how Sarah used to run to Kipros's house whenever she was scolded. A sweet flashback shows the young childhood friends sitting together on the grass eating bread. Sarah claims she has no recollection of this, but Kipros notes her eating habit remains identical. In chibi form, Sarah grows increasingly irritated, realizing the memory predates her current consciousness. Angered by the comparison, chibi Sarah loudly curses Kipros to suffer an equally embarrassing fate. Kipros cheerfully asks if her emotional outburst helped her feel better, receiving a dry response. An overhead shot captures the pair sitting quietly by the pool inside the elegant cafe. Kipros stands up and offers to escort Sarah back to the palace for her safety. In chibi form, Sarah distances herself by reminding him that he is technically an outsider. Kipros dramatically claims to be deeply hurt, while chibi Sarah dismissively tells him to go away. Kipros points out her coldness, comparing her behavior to her warm interactions with Prince Plaha. Sarah freezes in utter shock as Kipros suddenly brings up her kissing Plaha's neck. A quick flashback recalls the intimate moment where Sarah pressed her lips to Plaho's neck. Another memory reveals a startled Kipros witnessing the scene from afar while surrounded by noblewomen. Kipros's intense gaze appears as he confidently reasserts that he witnessed the entire encounter. Kipros stares down at her with a smug, knowing grin, enjoying her obvious discomfort. System status card notes the temporary safety zone in District 3 is officially closing. A close-up captures Sarah staring blankly, completely paralyzed by the sudden exposure of her secret. Kipros reiterates his claim, making it absolutely clear that his eyes did not deceive him. In chibi form, Sarah sweats profusely, her mind reeling in utter confusion and panic. Blushing furiously, Sarah slams her hand on the table and loudly denies kissing Plaha. A nearby noblewoman giggles and gossips as coffee splashes from the table next to him. Regaining her composure, Sarah intensely demands that Kipros pretend he never saw anything. Kipros counteroffers to forget if she does the same for his own illicit actions. A chibi memory depicts Kipros catching Sarah retrieving a valuable jewel from a fallen corpse. Sweating nervously, Sarah asks why he is suddenly bringing up such a dangerous topic. In chibi form, Kipros smiles brightly as he confirms his mutual blackmail proposal. Under a blazing sunset, the two bid each other farewell until the upcoming imperial meeting. Sarah quietly watches Kipros walk away as he exits through the grand glass doors. Plaha sits solemnly at his desk surrounded by white flowers in a quiet room. Kipros recalls questioning Plaha's motives after being abruptly dismissed from his company earlier. Kipros realizes Plaha purposefully sent him away to find and comfort the distressed Sarah. A flashback shows Plaha aggressively grabbing Kipros by the collar, catching him completely off guard. Plaha fiercely orders Kipros to immediately search for Sarah in District 3's Helena Street. In the present, Plaha walks alone, quietly wondering if Kipros successfully managed to find Sarah. Kipros asks Prince Plaha if the assigned bodyguards have already informed him of the situation. A guard delivers Prince Plaha's direct orders, instructing Kipros to go to the stock exchange. Kipros stands before Plaha at his desk, observing how deeply the prince cares for Sarah. Walking closer, Kipros questions how Plaha knew Sarah's whereabouts and if he was secretly monitoring her. Kipros points out that Plaha cannot possibly monitor her actions constantly in real time. Plaha explains that Sarah is crucial to the case, warning of potential delayed symptoms. In chibi form, Kipros explains he was delayed due to a summons from the general. Kipros challenges Plaha, suggesting the prince lacked the confidence to comfort Sarah himself. A thought balloon highlights Plaha's lack of confidence in comforting Sarah during her distress. Kipros leans aggressively over the desk, confronting Plaha to make a sharp point. Kipros reminds Plaha of his distant relationship with Sarah as a somber memory flashes back. Kipros gazes intensely at Plaha, waiting for his response during their tense conversation. In chibi form, Plaha counters by reminding Kipros that his own over-closeness ruined his bond with her. Plaha admits that Kipros's assessment is correct while Kipros listens in silence. A painful memory shows Sarah weeping bitterly, directing her sorrowful accusations at Kipros. Kipros demands to know why Plaha cares so much, prompting a solemn stare from the prince. Plaha hands Kipros a travel permit, instructing him to complete his mission within 4 days. As Plaha leaves to summon the guards, Kipros asks where he is heading. Kipros instantly recognizes Plaha's explanation as another lie, narrowing his eyes in suspicion. Kipros stops Plaha at the door, questioning why he refuses to be honest about his actions. Plaha defensively dismisses Kipros's prying by asking if people normally disclose every detail of their lives. As the door slams shut, Kipros scoffs at how easily the prince dismisses their companion's worth. Kipros contemplates how drastically Sarah's demeanor and personality have changed over time. He fondly remembers a gentler time when Sarah smiled brightly while holding a yellow dress. Kipros recalls how Sarah began to dread his presence after realizing her feelings were unrequited. He remembers her looking back with tearful, fearful red eyes, completely estranged from him. A memory box recalls Sarah asking them not to force themselves to treat her well. The flashback shows Sarah smiling politely, stating that disappointment only arises from unmet expectations. Sarah coldly declares in her red gown that she expects absolutely nothing from either of them. Kipros finds her complete lack of expectations deeply unsettling, his expression hardening. Sarah further distances herself, stating she would prioritize saving the person she loves over him. Under deep blue water, Kipros wonders why she doesn't hate him with betrayed eyes instead. Looking out the window at sunset, Kipros bitterly ponders whom she is trying to save. A split image depicts Sarah's past innocent self contrasting with her current guarded, elegant persona. Kipros crushes the travel permit in his hand, determined to uncover her true motives. Kipros smiles with an intrigued grin, finding the mysterious situation highly amusing. The scene shifts to Sarah tightly clutching the fabric of her cream-colored dress in frustration. Sarah holds up a glowing, multifaceted red gemstone, inspecting it with intense curiosity. Bringing the jewel close to her forehead, she reacts with sudden confusion as it flares. Sweating nervously, Sarah stares in astonishment as she recognizes the magical artifact. As Sarah walks down a sunlit street, she contemplates if changing the past is truly possible. Wind blows through her dark hair as she resolutely rejects looking back on her choices. Reaching toward a blinding golden light, Sarah vows to keep helping others regardless of consequences. Walking toward a beautiful sunset, Sarah decides to focus solely on her path forward. Sarah glances over her shoulder with a serene, confident smile under the bright sunlight. Clutching the glowing red gemstone tightly in her fist, she discovers a small beacon of hope. Followed by 2 palace guards, Sarah requests to be escorted directly to a nearby bookstore. She adds that they must also visit a law firm immediately after their bookstore stop. A red-tinted, foreboding vision shows a terrifying horde of snarling zombies invading the palace halls. The comrades prepare for battle, ready to fight the impending undead threats side by side. Kipros and Plaha scream in terror as Sarah falls into a sinister horde of red shadows. Looming over the fallen Kipros, Sarah holds a dagger to his throat with cold intensity. She wonders what kind of unexpected consequences her choices will ultimately bring about. A system interface displays their safe zone status, marking the end of the current sequence. An urgent voice pleads from behind closed doors for someone to handle their troublesome brother. Duchess fumes in the dressing room, complaining about her son's reckless behavior at the racetrack. The narration explains that her younger brother has gone completely missing after arriving in the capital. Sarah stares deeply, questioning whether the sudden disappearance of her brother is merely a coincidence. Chibi Sarah offers to search for him, but the Duchess instantly forbids her from going. Chibi Sarah suggests sending a knight, which only frustrates the stubborn Duchess even further. Sarah holds her head in sheer exasperation, internally screaming over the Duchess's constant contradictions. Leaning in uncomfortably close, the Duchess bluntly asks Sarah if she is suffering from sleep deprivation. The Duchess continues to criticize her appearance, comparing her pale, tired face to a corpse. Complaining about Sarah's neglected scan, the Duchess sweeps out of the dressing room in annoyance. A sudden, loud slam echoes as the door closes, leaving Sarah to grumble over the parting insults. Sighing at her reflection, Sarah admits she has far too many personal problems to care about her brother. She pauses mid-thought, her eyes narrowing as she realizes something critical about her current situation. A well-meaning blonde maid eagerly steps forward to reassure Sarah that her skin is actually beautiful. The other maids quickly chime in, desperately trying to cheer Sarah up by criticizing the Duchess's harshness. Sarah smiles privately, satisfied that her decisive actions from the previous day successfully changed their behavior. Her mind wanders back to the previous day, remembering when she first held the mysterious book. The gray-haired headmaid quietly approaches to ask if her lady summoned her for something. The headmaid watches Sarah closely, privately noting that her mistress has been acting incredibly strange. The maid recalls how Sarah suddenly began searching through discarded trash and reading books all night. It notes that Sarah went from screaming hysterically to being completely calm and collected. The quiet hallway is suddenly filled with a soft clack sound as Sarah halts her steps. Sarah bluntly asks the head maid if she has managed to locate her missing slippers. Sarah demands answers, accusing the staff of throwing away her slippers without her permission. The maid mockingly lies, claiming the slippers were already burned in the incinerator to humble her. The maid insists she saw them burn, completely unaware that Sarah already knows the truth. Staring with glowing red eyes, Sarah threatens to hand the lying maid over to the authorities. The maid's smug composure instantly shatters into panic at the mention of the security forces. The narration reveals Sarah's actions immediately after parting ways with Kipros 2 days prior. She had discovered the slippers sitting perfectly intact inside the incinerator, exposing the maid's lie. Sarah corners the trembling maid, laying out the legal charges of disposing of her personal property. Grabbing the maid's jaw, Sarah coldly warns her that unauthorized disposal of a noble's belongings is theft. She mockingly asks if the maid truly believes no one will listen to her accusations. She acknowledges that the servants are used to mocking Sarah due to her poor reputation. Sarah firmly notes that insubordination and falsified reports are severe offenses in her professional eyes. Sarah warns the head maid that regardless of her rank, exile is her inevitable fate. Terrified of exile, the weeping head maid drops to her knees and desperately begs for forgiveness. A cold, triumphant smile plays on Sarah's lips as she offers the maid a single condition. Sarah demands the maid hand over the keys to the household without further delay. A sudden metallic jangle rings out as the maid reaches for her keys, signaling the start of the household's discipline. Sarah smiles proudly, reflecting that her sleepless nights of reading were well worth the survival knowledge. The now submissive head maid politely presents dress options, asking what Sarah wishes to wear. The maid recommends the highly fashionable dresses shown on the miniature display dolls. Shunning the elegant gowns entirely, Sarah bluntly requests a pair of pants instead. She specifies her need for sturdy pants, walking shoes, and a tear-resistant long-sleeved shirt. Prepared for the challenges ahead, Sarah stands with newfound confidence and a bright smile. Sarah adds a brief postscript to her instructions before taking action. With a sudden sharp snip, her long black hair is decisively cut short. Gasping in complete shock, the Duchess clutches her chest in disbelief. Overcome with rage, the Duchess furiously threatens to dismiss the household staff. She hysterically demands to know who authorized cutting her daughter's hair. Striding forward in trousers and boots, Sarah announces she ordered the haircut. Sarah calmly explains that her numerous enemies necessitate a more practical style. She declares the short hair prevents zombies from grabbing her in combat. Smiling with absolute confidence, Sarah announces her departure for the meeting. A bright sun illuminates the estate as Sarah sets off on her journey. Several noble women giggle and whisper behind their hands as Sarah arrives. The guests gossiping in the corridor remark on her talent for seeking attention. Wearing her striking white suit, Sarah walks past the critical whispers of the crowd. Undeterred, Sarah sits down and crosses her arms with a calm demeanor. She suppresses her growing irritation at the petty gossip surrounding her. The nobles mockingly attribute her bold behavior to a lack of childhood affection. They laughingly point out her past rejection by the crown prince. Sarah internally retorts that self-love is far more valuable than male validation. A beautiful blonde noblewoman privately dismisses the shallow nature of the surrounding gossip. Sarah's eyes narrow as she registers the presence of a newcomer nearby. The striking blonde noblewoman stands gracefully in her elegant blue cape. She observes the gathering with a cold, piercing gaze. The whispering nobles gasp in shock as the blonde noblewoman approaches them. With a soft rustle, the blonde lady sits down directly next to Sarah. Sarah notes her silence, prompting a calm acknowledgement from the blonde lady. The blonde lady sharply tells the gossiping nobles to stop their staring. She firmly defends Sarah, leaving the critical nobles completely speechless. Rising to her feet, Lady Mascarpone criticizes their failure to check schedules. The nobles stare in absolute bewilderment at the sudden confrontation. Grabbing Sarah's wrist, Lady Mascarpone insists they depart the gathering immediately. With a quick step sounding, she leads Sarah away, glad she arrived in time. Sarah questions her compliance, but Lady Mascarpone urges her not to submit. Sarah remembers being left to wait in the audience chamber in the past. Smiling warmly, Sarah thanks her companion for coming to rescue her. Lady Mascarpone looks away silently, her expression softening slightly. Sarah observes her companion, internally noting that she has grown noticeably thinner. She recalls a happier memory of Lady Mascarpone smiling brightly. Sarah reflects on how much they have both changed over time. She ponders the extensive research she conducted over the past 2 days. She recalls learning that their world is actively governed by real gods. The golden god of light stands as a primary example of divinity. A benevolent, pink-haired goddess offers her blessings to the faithful. Sarah's inner thoughts weigh the practical benefits of magic versus divine favor. She notes that magic allows warriors to cast fire from their weapons. It also enables instantaneous transportation across vast distances through portal gates. Her research notes that divine power operates under entirely different rules. She reflects that those without magical talent must rely on the cathedral. Magic requires incredibly complex calculations, making natural prodigies exceptionally rare. She realizes casting magic during a fast-paced zombie attack is highly impractical. Sarah folds her arms, questioning the true nature of her own magical abilities. Mascarpone turns to ask Sarah what is on her mind as they stand together. In a brief memory, Mascarpone expresses gratitude for the medication, while Sarah shares a tip on eco-friendly disposal. The scene shifts back to reality as someone reaches out to open a grand door. Sarah and Mascarpone stride confidently into the grand meeting chamber together, dressed in their uniforms. As they enter the massive circular room, Mascarpone looks around and wonders where they should sit. Mascarpone is shocked to learn they are being relegated to the spectator seats despite their involvement. Feeling bitter about the snub, Mascarpone manages a quiet, self-deprecating smile. Mascarpone notes with resignation that the council members have no interest in hearing their opinions. Sarah takes her seat beside Mascarpone, noticing her companion's deeply dejected state. High above, the whisper spreads that Rina is absent, further dampening the mood in the gallery. The council members discuss how the emperor will certainly be displeased by this development. Sarah thoughtfully processes the news of Rina's absence, her red eyes narrowing in contemplation. Sarah envisions Rina as a pious saint bathed in divine radiant light during prayer. Recognizing a potential lead, Sarah resolves that she must investigate the temple for answers. Sarah imagines the white-robed priests of the temple bowing in solemn devotion. Sarah silently hopes a divine revelation might show her a way back to her original home. Unfortunately, she remembers that the capital holds no temples, making any solo journey highly dangerous. Sarah recalls how the emperor taxed the temple heavily after the war, forcing them to relocate. She reflects on Grand Duke Kypros, who unexpectedly departed the capital for his own territory. Mascarpone's expression darkens with deep anxiety as the discussion turns to Pubri. An ominous feeling looms as Mascarpone reveals Pubri was ordered back to the villa. A terrifying vision of a bloody attack suggests Pubri has likely met a grim fate. Sarah absorbs the grim news, her crimson eyes reflecting quiet concern. Mascarpone grips her own leg tightly, bringing up Sarah's past question about magical items. A memory shows Sarah asking Mascarpone for useful items, only for Mascarpone to deny having any. The truth hangs heavily in the air as Mascarpone admits that her previous answer was a lie. Looking down in shame, Mascarpone confesses she lied out of fear of being abandoned by everyone. Tears fill Mascarpone's eyes as she bitterly regrets her selfishness, blaming herself for a girl's death. In absolute despair, Mascarpone cries that Consomme's tragic demise is entirely her fault. Sarah looks at her crying companion with deep empathy and silent understanding. Seeking comfort or assistance, Mascarpone reaches out and tightly grasps Sarah's wrist. Before Mascarpone can finish her request, a booming voice commands immediate silence in the room. The massive gilded doors swing open, flooding the entrance with bright, dramatic light. An imposing figure enters, introduced as the powerful ruler favored by the Empire's 12 gods. The Emperor and the dark blue-haired Crown Prince make their grand entrance into the silent hall. The herald officially announces their arrival as the golden-eyed Crown Prince Plaha steps forward majestically. Plaha's cold, commanding presence prompts a direct order for everyone to bow their heads. Beautiful blue tulips decorate the quiet, majestic hall, framing the arrival of royalty. Crown Prince Plaha stands tall, radiating absolute authority as he prepares to address the council. The entire room instantly drops to the floor, bowing deeply in absolute deference. Bowing alongside the others, Sarah quietly notes that they are taking things incredibly far. Looking aside nervously, Sarah feels a bead of cold sweat roll down her cheek. Sarah internally panics, realizing this very prince is the one destined to execute her in the future. She recalls the original novel's plot, where Rina, Plaha, and Kypros formed the zombie investigation team. In that original story, the jealous villainous Sarah was excluded from the prestigious group entirely. Driven by envy, the original Sarah followed them, selfishly letting others die during monster attacks. Ultimately, Plaza refused to tolerate her cruelty and executed her, sealing her tragic fate. Heavy, polished boots step forward, drawing closer as the tense silence stretches on. Keeping her head down, Sarah grumbles in silent agony as her knees begin to ache painfully. The scarred, white-haired sovereign stands proudly, introduced as the ruthless Emperor of Blood and Steel. The narrator explains how the ruthless current emperor sent young Plaha and Kypros to the war zone. They fought on the battlefield, ultimately turning a losing war into a victorious triumph. The narrative explains that after becoming the first female emperor, she appointed women to seats and amended inheritance laws, though society struggled to adapt. The narrator notes that some people in the empire continued to discriminate against and despise women. Others, like Darjeeling, become prominent knights, defining the era shaped by the current emperor's reforms. The white-haired female emperor smilingly commands everyone in the hall to be at ease. One official humbly expresses their honor, which another immediately dismisses as an exaggeration. Sarah silently wonders why Plaha looks nothing like the emperor and dressed so extravagantly. Plaha looks back in silence, his golden eyes radiating a calm and commanding intensity. Fearing she got caught staring, Sarah internally panics as a nervous sweat breaks out. Sarah mentally prepares herself as the high-stakes council meeting finally begins. The council discusses honoring the heroic sacrifices made by the knights and the head chef. The chief magician, Mascarpone's mother, reports that the portal operates normally without any intruder records. As a naturally occurring disease is proposed, Sarah mentally rejects the idea with horror. The speaker suggests the cause is either a superior magician's work or divine will. The Imperial University theology professor argues against divine will, citing the gods saving Rina. A heavy, contemplative silence falls over the entire council chamber as they process the theories. The female emperor slams her hand in fury, demanding why they cannot reach a single conclusion. Sarah dryly reflects that unproductive meetings are a universal constant, likely stemming from leadership issues. The emperor orders an investigation team to be formed and led by her appointed members. Reports confirm that Rina has become a scientist destined to serve the empire. Kipros smiles warmly at Plaha as the prospective members of the special squad are considered. The emperor entrusts the mission to her son, shocking Sarah at the sheer danger involved. Sarah recalls that the prince originally took this assignment to accept responsibility for the nobles' deaths. Sarah deeply worries about the pretexts and the high risk to the empire's succession. Sarah wonders if this assignment is punishment for Plaha taking action against Pubri without permission. The female emperor expresses high expectations, her chilling smile hinting at hidden, complex motives. Plaha bows deeply and accepts the dangerous mission with absolute obedience to his mother. The emperor sternly reminds Plaha that his worth is tied entirely to his absolute obedience. The emperor tightly grips her son's face, asserting her terrifying dominance over him. The narrator reveals that Plaha had incurred the emperor's wrath and was ultimately driven out. Plaha walks away in dignified silence, leaving the onlookers whispering in his wake. Plaha remains lost in his thoughts, his quiet demeanor masking a deeper internal conflict. Plaha approaches Sarah directly, greeting her warmly and noting that it has been a while. Sarah finds his greeting odd, silently noting it has only been 3 days since then. Sarah stares back in sheer confusion as Plaha calls her name once again in silence. Plaha gazes back with a remarkably soft and sparkling intensity that completely shifts the mood. The two walk side by side down the corridor in a comfortable, quiet understanding. Sarah politely thanks him for the letter, and Plaha simply responds with a quiet affirmation. When Sarah notices his earrings, Plaha explains it is due to his mother's influence. Sarah flashes a playful, teasing smile that catches the crown prince completely off guard. The gap between them vanishes as they share an incredibly close, heart-pounding romantic moment. Breaking the silence, Sarah gently addresses the prince as they stand close together. Sarah reaches out, tenderly cupping his cheek as she calls his name with sincere concern. Sarah questions why he must lead such a dangerous team when the empire needs an heir. Plaha declares his duty to protect the citizens, volunteering regardless of the emperor's command. Plaha admits his mother wanted to reprimand him, but he stands firmly by his choices. Plaha vows he would make the same choice again, which Sarah secretly respects. The prince softly calls her name as his fingers gently trace her hand in the quiet garden. Sarah requests a special favor from the crown prince, catching him entirely by surprise. Plaha looks down at Sarah with intense blushing vulnerability, his hand resting near his face as the mood softens. Sarah looks at him with shocked crimson eyes, questioning why she was chosen since she lacks combat skills. Plaha smiles gently, pointing out that her calm actions were crucial to their escape from the dangerous villa. A montage of memories highlight Sarah's clever tactics, including her plan to lure zombies and set up traps to protect them. In a humorous inner thought, Chibi Sarah sheepishly attributes her survival skills entirely to her love of zombie movies. The prince leans in close, asking in a hushed tone if she also possesses a hidden, unique magical ability. A terrifying flashback shows the original novel Sarah forcefully silencing a witness, threatening them never to reveal what they saw. Returning to the present, Sarah stands frozen in shock as she realizes her secret might be exposed. The narration ominously points out that the prince is referring to her hidden hypnosis ability. The prince remains close, repeating his probing question about her mysterious power. The narration confirms the existence of her dangerous hypnotic power, heightening the tension. Sweating nervously, Sarah wonders how much he knows as her secret power is brought to light. A close-up of Sarah's crimson eye reveals a faint, glowing magic circle swirling within her pupil. The mechanics of her spell are explained, revealing a strict 1-minute duration that only works on rational targets. Spell's limits are shown, noting it requires direct eye contact and completely fails against animals and zombies. A memory shows a victim of her spell realizing they were manipulated, illustrating the power's major drawback. The text explains how this ability allows the user to manipulate others to ensure survival in times of extreme danger. The narrative notes how Sarah hated her dark magic, envying the pure healing blessings of her rival, Rina. Bitterly lamenting her despicable power, Sarah had nonetheless relied on it cunningly just to stay alive. Ultimately, her selfish survival tactics led to Plaha executing her with his blade in the original timeline. Back in the bright garden, Plaha and Sarah stand in quiet suspense, the weight of the past hanging over them. Sarah watches him warily, knowing that the original villainess used this power to control a knight. Plaha explains that her magic could be incredibly useful in uncovering the truth behind the zombie crisis. Sarah declines to use the ability, but Plaha reassures her that he highly values her judgment regardless. In a chibi moment, Sarah nervously confesses she hasn't used the magic in so long that she forgot how. She resolutely declares that she will rely on her intellect and clever ideas to navigate the crisis instead. Sarah takes a sharp breath, looking up with wide, hopeful eyes as she faces the prince. She offers a nervous sweat-drop smile, asking if she is being too presumptuous about her abilities. Plaha's cold gaze melts into a remarkably warm, supportive smile that catches her completely by surprise. Reassured by his kind reaction, Sarah pumps her fist with newfound confidence and a bright grin. Suddenly, a thin stream of blood drips from Sarah's nose, catching her entirely off guard. Plaha panics instantly, rushing forward to cover her nose while Sarah blames her lack of sleep. Sweating with worry, Plaha asks if she gets nosebleeds often, and Sarah admits it has been several months. The scene shifts to the greenhouse plants as Plaha notes that such frequency is highly concerning. Overwhelmed with concern, Plaha holds his handkerchief to her nose with desperate tenderness. Plaha gently cradles her head, pulling her close against his chest in an incredibly intimate moment. Clutched tightly in his embrace, a bewildered Sarah internally panics over this sudden romantic development. Standing in the middle of the garden, the prince refuses to let go as Sarah awkwardly tries to pull away. Sarah tearfully stuffs cotton into her nostrils and gives a thumbs up, claiming she is perfectly fine now. Before she can walk away, Plaha firmly grabs her arm, urging her to stop. Plaha reminds her of his previous promise to treat her well, looking at her with deep sincerity. Sarah blankly wonders if he ever said that, politely insisting she does not want to cause him trouble. Looking flustered, Jibisara explains that her previous encounters with him were purely accidental. Meanwhile, Grand Duke Kypros observes the scene from a distance, feeling a strange sense of déjà vu. Reluctantly agreeing to let her rest, Plaha secures a promise from Sarah to meet again soon. Reflecting on the main quest, Sarah notes she never wanted to join the dangerous investigation team in the first place. Knowing the team's high mortality rate, she reflects on the mysterious glowing stone she recovered from a defeated zombie. Sarah recalls holding the radiant red gemstone close to her eye, her curiosity piqued by its magical aura. A flashback introduces a cheerful orange-haired young man working diligently as a royal servant. The young servant's pride in serving the palace and his joy in buying gifts for his parents are highlighted. Inside a gleaming red gemstone, the spirits of the deceased palace servants are visibly trapped. A wooden drawer holds several glowing red stones, confirming many victims are sealed within. Sarah stares at a gemstone shard, wondering if breaking the seal can revive the zombies. Tears well in Sarah's eyes as she determines she must find a way to save Consomme. A luxurious red imperial train waits at the station platform under the bright daylight. Sitting alone inside the quiet train car, Sarah rests her chin in deep contemplation. Sarah laments having to work in her reincarnated life, wishing she could quit. Plaha suddenly appears, questioning if she truly traveled all this way without any guards. Sarah turns completely red, trying desperately not to be distracted by his impressive physique. Plaha sits closely beside her, warning that traveling alone is far too dangerous. Clasping her hands together, Sarah earnestly begs Plaha to protect her during the mission. Plaha blushes slightly, his stoic expression softening into a gentle smile at her plea. In a comical chibi moment, Sarah instructs him to abandon her if things turn worst. Kypros slides in close, greeting Sarah warmly while showing off his chest tattoo. Kypros checks in on Plaha's arm and the prince confirms it has healed. Kypros continues to show off, prompting a flustered, chibi Sarah to decline looking. Kypros leans uncomfortably close to Sarah, making her sweat under his golden gaze. Plaha quickly steps in, firmly grabbing Kypros's hand to pull him away from her. Chibi versions of the trio stare at each other in awkward, tense silence. Rina runs up with her pink hair flying, expressing great joy at seeing Sarah. Sarah congratulates Rina on becoming a saintess, but Rina humbly brushes off the praise. The two girls suddenly freeze as a loud, energetic presence interrupts their conversation. A hand salutes sharply in the doorway, a swift slap sounding as it strikes her brow. Tangerine, a highly energetic orange-haired female knight, greets them with a bright smile. Chibisara sighs in exasperation, realizing that more chaotic companions keep joining them. Plaha introduces Tangerine as the skilled Imperial Knight who will be accompanying their squad. A dark memory reveals Tangerine's ruthless side as a blood-soaked swordsman without hesitation. Chibi Tangerine loudly protests her introduction, worried it makes her sound completely heartless. Sarah watches in silent disbelief, noting the huge gap between rumor and reality. Plaha and Kypros discuss the team's dynamics while Chibisara reflects on her predicament. Plaha reveals they will stop first at Prom, a small village on their route. Plaha explains they need to find a sacred relic in an ancient labyrinth gear. A system screen details the mission party, listing Sarah as the weak problem child. Sarah breaks into a cold sweat, accepting her role as literal dead weight. The train suddenly whistles with a sharp peep sounding, signaling its imminent departure. The carriage door closes, and a heavy, tense atmosphere settles over the traveling group. The carriage suddenly shakes with a heavy rumble sounding as they head into darkness. A bloody flashback depicts a victim violently transforming into a zombie as blood splatters. Tangerine cheerfully chats about her relationships, holding her cheeks with a cute expression. The group responds with a deadpan sweat drop to her unexpectedly bubbly and talkative nature. Tangerine points out the elegant bow that Sarah is carrying behind her back. Sarah presents a beautiful, ornate magic bow decorated with a glowing red jewel. Sarah draws the bow back, testing its weight and marveling at its light design. A flashback shows the blonde-haired woman gifting Sarah the lightweight bow for her safety. An illustration reveals the bow as Sarah explains she has archery experience from college. Sarah visualizes herself as a legendary archer, jokingly claiming her ancestry to Yoichi. Sarah smiles proudly, glad her past archery practice will finally be put to use. A flashback shows the blonde-haired woman expressing shock over Sarah joining the research team. The blonde-haired woman looks down with narrowed, suspicious eyes, questioning Sarah's true intentions. Grabbing Sarah's hands tightly, the blonde-haired woman asks if Sarah has seen through her. Sarah reflects on her dangerous situation, noting that others haven't noticed her plight yet. Consomé's selfless hope for Sarah's survival in the previous timeline is revealed in a poignant memory. Tears stream down Consomé's face in the flashback as she looks at Sarah. Sarah holds Consomé close, looking at her with deep intensity during their emotional moment. Consomé weeps bitterly as her overwhelming emotions completely take over. Sarah embraces Consomé tightly to comfort her during their tearful goodbye. Consomé explains her decision to join a research lab to investigate the mysterious zombie corpses. Consomé admits her total lack of magical capability despite being the chief mage's daughter. Sarah challenges Consomé's self-doubt, reminding her that magic is driven by sheer willpower. The ultimate potential of willpower-based magic is described as reaching even the divine. Sarah realizes that strong determination can transcend limits to defy even the gods themselves. Consomé fastens a delicate beaded bracelet onto Sarah's wrist, a soft chime sounding. Consomé gives Sarah the special bracelet to aid her on her journey. Consomé wishes Sarah a safe journey as they promise to fulfill their respective roles. Sarah smiles warmly, deeply touched by Consomé's thoughtful parting gift. Sarah departs with a determined farewell, wearing the protective bracelet. Back in the present, Sarah holds the beautiful magic bow, deep in thought. Sarah smiles confidently, resolving to use her archery skills for protection. Sarah internally notes Tangerine's blunt and naturally rude demeanor with exasperation. Tangerine excitedly pesters Rina, who responds with nervous hesitation. Sarah rests her chin on her hand, observing the chaotic team with a quiet sigh. Chibisaura suggests using the term zombie for the corpses, despite its unfamiliarity to others. Plowek questions the name, but Sarah defends it as a more convenient term. Kipros wonders about the word's meaning, which Sarah dismisses as arbitrary. Tangerine suddenly stands up, loudly asking if anyone is hungry. Kipros dryly points out that Tangerine is likely just talking about her own hunger. Kipros compliments Tangerine's hidden competence despite her playful attitude. Rina overanalyzes Tangerine's personality, while Kipros sets the record straight. Sarah daydreams about eating French fries, hoping no danger strikes their train journey. The quiet moment is shattered as Sarah and Rina sense sudden trouble. Sarah notices the train has unexpectedly stopped in the middle of nowhere. Sarah nervously wonders if she has accidentally triggered a dangerous event. Tangerine walks down the quiet carriage corridor to investigate the sudden stop. Tangerine notes the unusual lack of passengers in the train carriage. Tangerine discovers a worried man comforting a feverish woman in their seats. The sick woman groans weakly as her companion tries to soothe her. Tangerine is momentarily reminded of her own past with her beloved brother. Tangerine offers a friendly smile, approaching the couple to help. The young man explains that his sister's merely suffering from a back cold. Tangerine gently asks if she can check on the sick sister. Tangerine freezes in horror as a terrifying zombie silhouette suddenly appears behind the glass. A bloodthirsty zombie bursts into the carriage, sending the couple into absolute panic. Back in the first-class car, Plaha and Kipros realize Tangerine has run into trouble. A frantic shout echoes through the carriage, calling for the prince. Tangerine rushes back, breathlessly warning the group about the zombie invasion. Pla orders an evacuation while telling Sarah to stay back for her safety. Sarah stands firm, her eyes flashing with resolve to fight back. The team prepares for battle as a horde of zombies swarms their carriage. The train's glass door begins to shatter under the weight of the zombie onslaught. Sarah readies her magical bow as the barrier finally gives way. The glass barrier shatters violently as a horde of red-eyed zombies forces their way inside. Sarah draws her magical bow back with sharp focus, ready to shoot the encroaching monsters. With a loud crash sounding, the protective barrier shatters completely, unleashing the mindless horde. Plaha and Kipros stand back to back, swords drawn and resolute against the incoming danger. With a swift dash sounding, the two warriors leap forward to cut down the zombies. With a wet slice sounding, Plaha's blade cuts cleanly through a zombie's flesh. Tangerine urgently directs Rina to run with her toward the safer carriage. With a heavy thud sounding, Kipros impales a zombie but struggles under their relentless weight. A terrifying zombie shadow crawls forward aggressively, seeking its next victim in the chaos. Kipros desperately warns Plaha of a zombie sneaking up right behind him. The sharp thud sounding, an arrow pierces the monster, saving Plaha just in time. Sarah scans the hallway, frantically asking if they have cleared all the enemies. Tangerine confirms the evacuation is complete, prompting Sarah to consider their next move. Declaring flight as the best choice, Sarah immediately books it down the train corridor. With heavy panting sounding, the exhausted group catches their breath and said the relative safety. Kipros tried Sarah for sprinting away alone, but she defensively points out everyone survived. As zombies claw at the glass door, the group anxiously wonders how long it can hold. A worried passenger suggests escaping through a window, but his proposal is immediately shut down. Plaha explains that abandoning the train poses a collision risk for any following trains. With a loud screech sounding, the train halts dangerously atop a bridge over the water. Sarah is horrified to realize they are completely trapped directly above the vast light. Sarah proposes inspecting the engine room, predicting the driver has already succumbed to the infection. Sarah asks for volunteers to join her, and Plaha immediately steps forward to accompany her. Plaha instructs Kipros and Tangerine to guard the entrance against any incoming zombies. Plaha prepares to depart, while Kipros turns his attention to call out to Sarah. Kipros gently places a hand on Sarah's shoulder, stopping her for a brief moment. Kipros leans in uncomfortably close to Sarah, wishing her luck with a knowing smile. Sarah's sweat drops, thoroughly baffled by Kipros's strangely intense and lingering farewell gesture. Plaha casts a cold, suspicious glare back at Kipros as they walk away. Tangerine squeals with excitement, teasing Kipros about his obvious favoritism towards Sarah. Tangerine continues to playfully tease Kipros, much to his exasperated and silent annoyance. Sarah scratches her head, promising she will try her best not to get bitten. Plaha suddenly pulls Sarah close to his side, his voice low and serious. With a firm grip sounding, Plaha takes Sarah's hand and leads her down the corridor. Kipros watches their departing figures in silent contemplation as they head toward the engine. Tangerine leans close to Kipros with a mischievous smirk, enjoying his obvious inner conflict. Tangerine accuses Kipros of being disappointed by the turn of events, which he flatly denies. With a sudden rustle sounding, Tangerine freezes as her sharp night instincts register a sound. Nearby, the worried young passenger holds his feverish sister close as her condition worsens. In the quiet cabin, a dark figure slumps motionless over the train's controls. With soft footsteps sounding, Sarah creeps into the room, wondering if the driver is safe. The driver suddenly snaps his head around, revealing horrifying glowing yellow eyes and bloody jaws. Crying out in sheer panic, Sarah immediately regrets her naive hopes as the monster attacks. With a swift whoosh sounding, Plaha pulls Sarah back and slashes his sword defensively. Plaha confirms the driver became a zombie, while Sarah grimly accepts the expected reality. Sarah suggests jumping into the lake, but Plaha notes the train's walls resist lightning. Plaha agrees that destroying the train is viable and asks Sarah for a plan. With a sudden burst sounding, they realize derailing the train is their only option. Plaha resolutely volunteers to drive and sacrifice the train himself to defeat the horde. Sarah freezes in shock, pleading with Plaha not to sacrifice himself for their safety. Plaha reassures the worried red-eyed woman of his safe return, though she fears his promise is a jinx. Sarah commands Plaha to bow his head lower, physically pulling him down to her level. Sarah buries her face into Plaha's shoulder, holding him tightly in a silent, emotional embrace. Looking deeply into his eyes, Sarah explains she is giving him a safe return charm. Demanding a promise, Sarah vows to lead the evacuation and expects him to meet her again. Plaha clasps her hand tightly, promising to do his best and survive as long as possible. Plaha lets out a soft laugh, touched by her fierce determination to see him survive. Sarah stares in stunned silence, her heart fluttering at the rare sight of his warm smile. With a final soft agreement, Plaha reluctantly releases her hand and prepares to face his duty. With a sharp slap sounding, the protective brother aggressively warns Tangerine to stay away from his sick sister. Tangerine stands frozen in stunned surprise, taken aback by the young man's sudden hostility. Tangerine gently tries to ease the tension, praising his brotherly devotion and asking him to lower his guard. The brother clenches his jaw, silent and deeply troubled as he cradles his suffering sister close. Tangerine grows suspicious, wondering if the brother is merely terrified or hiding a darker secret. Rena notes the train's movement, questioning the driver's safety, while Kipros grimly doubts any favorable outcome. Tangerine and Kipros suddenly freeze in alarm as a frantic voice echoes through the carriage. Sarah bursts into the carriage, frantically urging everyone to evacuate immediately. A survivor status board lists the remaining group members as the infected swarm the other cabins.